Chapter 1643. Within the heaven-pulling sect, Qin Yu's body trembled and he slowly opened his eyes. He looked down at his hands and raised them to pinch his cheeks. Then he slowly pulled them outwards. Pain. This was real. He wasn't dreaming, and this wasn't an illusion. The 9 Melodies' heavenly palace. He had actually succeeded just like that. Ah! Qin Yu cried out in pain and fell backwards. With a loud bang, his head smashed into the hard ground. He rolled around, his heart going crazy. Impossible! How could this be possible? How could there be such a terrifying cultivation in this world? Even if there was, those that could cultivate to this step were all old turtles. How could they be so stupid as to harm themselves to benefit others? Qin Yu couldn't figure it out. Suddenly he cried out miserably. With a light cracking sound, his eyebrows split open and a shallow wound appeared. But to Qin Yu, it was like a ruthless knife had pierced through his soul. The pain was one aspect, but what was even more terrifying was that it involved life and death. Ignoring the pain of his soul splitting open, Qin Yu climbed up and kowtowed. Congratulations, Master, for completing the 9 Melodies' heavenly grand Tao. From now on, you can become a celestial being. There was no response. The crack between his eyebrows slowly healed. But not only was there no joy on Qin Yu's face, it was as if he had lost his parents. Just now, Qin Yu's main body had really moved to kill him on the spot. But it was worried that he had just completed the heavenly grand Tao and killing him would cause instability, so it chose to temporarily keep the peace. In other words, once Qin Yu stabilized his realm and the heavenly grand Tao became as solid as a boulder, it would be the first one to kill him. If it were anyone else, they definitely wouldn't do this. A living world spirit embryo avatar would be an amazing boon to one's cultivation. But Qin Yu wasn't an ordinary person to begin with. Everything in the past had already proven this. Otherwise, how could he have found the world spirit embryo and successfully planted a soul? How could he have come out alive with that terrifying existence by his side? How could he have even completed the 9 Melodies' heavenly grand Tao? Just thinking about it was enough to make one's legs go numb, and they wished they could kneel on the ground instead of getting up. Qin Yu stood up and sighed. He pulled at his hair. If he wanted to continue living, he had to do things seriously. At the very least, he had to let Qin Yu know that being alive was the best outcome for him. As expected, as I lived, I became the person I hated the most in the past. In order to survive, I had to be busy all day and compromise all the time. I didn't have the time or the chance to truly enjoy life and embrace this world. The more he thought about it, the sadder he felt. Qin Yu shed tears of sorrow. Chongdao. Min Chanjing collapsed on the ground, his body drenched in sweat. He gasped for breath, like a fish that had been scooped out of the water. His face was ghastly pale, his eyes were dim, and coupled with his current sorry state, all of it showed that he was extremely weak. Little Meat was sitting cross-legged, not far away. Her face was just as pale, but at least on the surface, she seemed to be in a much better condition than Old Man Min. At this moment, she slowly opened her eyes and looked at Min Zhongjing. A glimmer of light flashed in the depths of her eyes. Lord Min turned his head and looked into her eyes. "Madam, this old man has really used all his strength this time. You won't go back on your word, will you?" Little Meat was silent for a moment. Then she faintly smiled. "Of course not. I have always abided by the virtue of keeping my word." She flipped her hand and took out a golden fragment. "I'll give this to you. We're even now." She casually tossed the exhausted Min Zhongjing to the side. Then his movements suddenly became vigorous, and he carefully caught the fragment. After carefully sensing it and making sure there wasn't anything wrong, he let out a long breath. His eyes were filled with resentment. "Madam, can you not scare me like that? If I can't catch it, wouldn't my heart explode from the pain?" Little Meat lightly said, "That's your problem." She looked at Min Zhongjing across from her and furrowed her eyebrows. The meaning in her eyes was clear. Why are you still here? With the item in hand, Min Zhongjing was in a slightly better mood, but he still choked a little. Wasn't this my home? This woman, she was really unreasonable. Of course. He didn't dare to show any of this on the surface. He smiled and cupped his hands together. Then he picked up the unconscious Min Xiangtai and respectfully withdrew. Bang, bang. The door to the room and courtyard closed one after another. His perception of the outside world was completely cut off. Of course, at this level of cutting off, Lord Min could still see it. But if he did so, he would clearly be discovered by the madam. He turned his head to look at the courtyard. Min Zhongjing's eyes flashed. He thought that the madam wouldn't be preparing to she shouldn't be. Otherwise, why would she have paid such a great price to begin with? Looking at the unconscious Min Xiangtai, who had almost been eaten up just now, Lord Min couldn't help but be enraged. He fiercely tossed him away. But as soon as he let go, he felt an incomparable pain in his heart. He hurriedly raised his hand, slowing down the speed at which he fell. Father, why are you here? I am. As Min Xiangtai spoke, his complexion changed. He crawled up and rushed in front of Lord Min. Where is Baiji? Where is Baiji? Father, let me tell you, you made me lose my fairy sister. If Baiji does this again, I won't forgive you. Min Zhongjing covered his face. This was really shameful. He raised his hand and slapped Min Xiangtai. Min Xiangtai was knocked out again. This kid was more pleasing to the eye when he was unconscious. The butler, who had been hiding somewhere, appeared in front of Min Zhongjing. He bowed respectfully. Master, please give me your orders. Go. Send the young master back to his room. He won't wake up for a few days. Don't worry about anyone. After sending off the honored guest, I will deal with him. Yes. The butler picked up Min Xiangtai and hurriedly left. He staggered and let out a bitter laugh. He raised his hand and rubbed his face with all his might. This time, although he had an unexpected harvest and was incomparably pleasantly surprised, he had still suffered a great loss. The 9 melodies, heavenly, great Tao. Only he could grit his teeth and endure it. If it were anyone else, they would have long been turned into a dried corpse. This time he had to go into seclusion for a few years to nourish his body. Allah, you bastard! Can't you see that I have come out? Are you ready? I'm about to die. Swish! Space flashed, and old chef's figure appeared. He was hunched over and carried a golden net in his hands. Inside, there were many lively fish and shrimp. If one looked carefully, they would discover that the eyes of these fish and shrimp were filled with panic and despair. They were all great monsters that had gained spiritual wisdom at the bottom of the lake. At this time, they had been forced to reveal their true forms. As old chef swept his eyes over them, they froze in place. With loud thumps, they fell to the ground, fainting from fright. Is this all you've got? If you don't have anything better, just how long am I going to eat this? As he frowned, he reached out and grabbed the golden net. He didn't know if it was an illusion or not, but where old chef grabbed it, the golden net seemed to dim a bit. He grabbed a red prawn and twisted his fingers. The prawn instantly turned into a dark red, thumb-sized pill that was swallowed in a single bite. Old chef rubbed his hands, a look of guilt on his face. I'm useless. Master, don't be angry. After the honored guest leaves in 2 days, I will go on a long trip and catch some great supplements for you. Old chef snorted and nodded. His hands didn't stop moving. After grabbing several times, the net was mostly empty. Only this old chef could eat monsters like jelly beans. If it were anyone else, they would either die from overeating or be corroded by their demonic energy. There were so many different water monsters, each with different demonic energy. If they were mixed together, it wouldn't be fun at all. But it was clear that neither old chef nor old chef were worried about this. After eating the last fish monster pill, old chef casually threw the golden net back. Hurry up and send me another batch. They aren't of much use, but it's better than nothing. Old Chef hurriedly nodded and disappeared. For the next 2 days, the only thing Old Chef did was eat, eat, eat. He didn't know how many water demons he had eaten in the lake. Only when the demon trapping formation within a radius of 100 miles had become sparse did Masterman slow down his feeding speed and casually toss them into his mouth, one by one. His face looked much better and ruddy. It was clear that as long as there was enough food, he could more or less make up for the lack of quality. Old Chef came again with a net full of fish and prawns. Looking at Old Chef eating weakly, his face was full of guilt. He thought for a while and said, "Old Chef, are you sure you don't want to try? That madam's condition might not be better than yours. If you can, not only can you recover your cultivation, but you can also improve further. By then, you might even become a truly perfect immortal." Old Chef pondered and shook his head after a few breaths. "Since that madam dared to let me sense her weakness, there's a possibility that it's an empty fort stratagem, but it's not very likely. I'm not willing to take the risk. Otherwise, I might be killed on the spot, even if I'm not perfect." That Grand Magus's heart was too troublesome. Otherwise, there might be a chance. Old Chef sighed in his heart. "Old Chef, I'll remember you for creating trouble in the dark again and again." Little Meaty's faint voice rang out. Old Chef frowned slightly. With a loud bang, Old Chef was sent flying all the way out of Long Island and landed in the demon-trapping array in the lake. The water demons, who were already scared out of their wits, smelled Old Chef's aura and desperately ran out as if they had gone crazy. They crashed into the demon-trapping array with a loud, rumbling sound. Their heads were bleeding and their scales were broken, but they did not dare to stop or look back. A mouthful of blood was at the edge of his mouth, but Old Chef forcefully swallowed it back. Otherwise, if he really spat out this mouthful of blood, all the water demons in the demon-trapping array would die. Old Chef still needed them to nourish his body, so he couldn't waste it like this. As for his own injury, because he forcefully swallowed this mouthful of blood, it would definitely worsen, but that was nothing. Old Chef didn't care at all. It didn't matter if he died 2 days earlier or 2 days later. The little girl's future was settled. Right now, he was forcing himself not to die because he wanted to help Old Chef one more time. Otherwise, Old Chef would rather die earlier. There was no meaning in living. He leaped out of the water. Old Chef's demon-trapping array naturally wouldn't suppress him. He landed on the island, dripping wet. He coughed lightly and bowed respectfully. "Madam, this was all my idea. It has nothing to do with Old Chef. If you want to blame someone, blame me." "All right." Little Meaty laughed coldly and dispersed her aura. Chapter 1644. 3 days later, Chinyu woke up. Every time he took a breath, he felt the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth converge on him. It flowed into his body like a trickling stream, increasing his strength. Although it was so weak that it was almost undetectable, the increase was real. Chinyu sensed it with rapt attention and gradually understood the function of the 9 bends, heavenly great path that Min Chongjing had helped him open. To put it simply, the current Chinyu could be said to be a very, very large bottle that had already been built with a good foundation. But no matter how big the bottle was, as long as he continued to pour water into it, it would eventually fill up bit by bit. This confirmed that Chinyu's future cultivation would be a matter of painstaking effort. He wouldn't have to work hard to comprehend and break through to the next realm by himself. As long as he accumulated enough, he would naturally cross the threshold of the immortal realm and become a member of the Emperor realm. Chinyu's difficulty in reaching the Emperor realm had been reduced by more than half, but the remaining part wasn't easy either. Accumulation was a slow process. Even if Chinyu was blessed by the heavens, it still wasn't enough to accumulate enough strength to cross the threshold of the Emperor realm in a short 30 years. Therefore, conventional cultivation methods wouldn't work. He had to find a new path. Whoosh! Exhaling, Chinyu opened his eyes. Sitting across from him, Little Meaty was drinking tea. She glanced at him and nodded. "Not bad. But remember, no matter how good the path others have opened for you, It can't compare to walking your own path. She raised a hand to rub her forehead. Plus, you're going to take a crooked path and pursue the fastest speed in your cultivation. There will definitely be problems with your foundation. Therefore, when you cross the threshold of the Emperor realm in the future, if you don't want to stop at the Great Path, you have to find a way to get rid of these problems. Qin nodded. I'll remember. Little Meaty stood up. If there's nothing else, we're leaving. We've been here for too long. We can't stay any longer. She was also worried that if they stayed any longer, she wouldn't be able to resist eating the old chef who kept provoking her on the verge of death. Humph! Using his own life to force Min Changjing to make up his mind and create a true immortal. This old thing was quite loyal. Just wait and see. This isn't over yet. If there's a chance in the future, I don't mind going to Changdao again to fulfill old chef's wish. Master Min's face was full of smiles as he welcomed Marquis Zhongwu and his 2 servants who came to say their goodbyes. He said that the Thousand Islands Commandery does have some beautiful scenery and that the Marquis and Madam would like to stay for a few more days and go sightseeing on the boat. His words were extremely sincere. Qin Yu expressed his deep apologies. He said that he had important matters to attend to, so he couldn't delay any longer. Then he expressed his heartfelt thanks to Lord Min for opening up the 9 heaven-span Great Tao. This gratitude made Min Changjing's face stiffen. If it wasn't for the madam standing behind you, this old man would have slapped you to teach you a lesson right now. Since you've taken advantage of me, don't try to show off. From start to finish, Little Meaty maintained her silence. As she watched Qin Yu and Min Changjing exchange pleasantries with each other, a look of impatience gradually appeared in her eyes. Cough! Since Marquis and Madam have made up their minds, this old man will not try to persuade you any further. I wish you a safe journey. Little Meaty turned and walked away. Qin Yu smiled and bowed in return. Thank you for your blessings. At the pier, the boat that Min Changjing had arranged was already ready. When the master and servants boarded the boat, it was like an arrow that had left a bow, whistling into the distance. The old chef's figure appeared once more. He quietly said, Master. This madam left of her own accord. She had to endure it for a long time. The meaning behind his words could be understood. Min Changjing rubbed his eyebrows. There is no need to speak of this matter. He turned and left. You old thing, do you want to die so easily now? There's no such thing in this world. I'm still suffering, so you can accompany your master and continue tormenting him. The old chef was left alone. He looked in the direction of the boat, sighing and moaning. Father, let's go back. The braided little girl appeared at the side. The old chef looked at his daughter. Tell me, was I wrong? The little girl said, You weren't wrong. The old chef revealed a gratified expression. She was indeed my daughter. Her heart was still on my side. But before he could finish his thought, he felt a sharp stab in his heart. Father, go and find Master. Ask him if his previous promise still stands. If I am still young Master's wife, I will do whatever you say. If there is a change, your daughter will call you father for the last time. In the future, we will be strangers. If we meet, I will break your leg. The old chef blinked his eyes. He looked at the serious little girl in front of him. She didn't seem to be joking at all. He felt as if there was a knife in his chest. He couldn't help but cry. On the boat, Qin Yu let out a long breath. His tense body relaxed. He sat back in his chair and poured himself a cup of tea. With a gulp, 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 he drank it all in one go. Ro looked at him. Useless. Her face was full of disdain and disdain. Qin Yu didn't care. He smiled and waved his hand. Miss Ro's divine skills are invincible, and your cultivation is as high as the heavens. Of course, I am far inferior to you. That is why I am afraid of being implicated. This is human nature. I ask Miss Ro to understand and not lower herself to my level. Glib tongue. Ro sneered. She turned and entered the cabin. Qin Yu faintly smiled. His heart was soft. Miss Ro had an invincible tongue. If she wanted to show off, then let her. In this sort of matter, if he wasn't willing to suffer loss, then his head would be caught in a door, or he would be kicked by a black donkey. The trip to the Thousand Islands County seemed smooth and without any problems, but even Chinyu, who didn't have much contact with them, could feel dangers everywhere. It was like walking on a tightrope. If he wasn't careful, he would fall and die a horrible death. As for Ro, the reason she made this trip was to help him open up the 9 Melodies Heavenspan Road. This was something she had already decided upon when she arrived at the heaven-pulling sect, or perhaps even earlier. There were some things that Ro didn't say and Chinyu didn't mention, but that didn't mean that his heart was muddled. Chinyu took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. He looked at the boundless waters in front of him, a complex look in his eyes. Min Changjing had helped him open up the 9 Melodies Heavenspan Road. One didn't need to be a genius to know that he must have suffered heavy losses. If he hadn't received the reward, would he have been willing to lower his head and admit defeat? Chinyu didn't believe that such an unfathomable character wouldn't have the courage to fight. Ro must have paid a great price, and this price should be the reason why she was trying so hard to cover up her current weakness. After the 9 Melodies Heavenspan Road was opened, Chinyu's perception abilities had become even stronger. It was only then that he was able to sense these clues. These were all favors. In just a short period of time, he seemed to have owed Ro a great debt. Chinyu reached out and grabbed the railing. He looked up into the skies. 9 suns shined above his head, illuminating the world since ancient times. The world was vast, far larger than he had ever seen. So, he needed to become stronger as soon as possible, stronger and stronger. He couldn't always be a little boy who only knew how to take without any reward. He stretched out his arm and clenched it into a fist. Chinyu waved it around and silently shouted out, "You can do it!" An hour later, he turned and returned to his cabin. From this day onwards, Chinyu began to cultivate with an even crazier intensity than before. The intensity was astonishing, nearly without rest or sleep. Ro frowned as she watched him, reminding him that he didn't need to put in so much effort. According to Ro, she had already prepared a good heretical method. Although it wasn't the correct path, it was still quite brilliant. It was just that it wasn't ready yet. Once Chinyu learned it, the speed at which he could absorb heaven and earth spiritual strength would rise. Chinyu believed Ro's words. Since she said this, then she must have made some preparations. But after he smiled, he continued to cultivate. "I know that the heretical method you prepared will surely have an astonishing effect. But you already reminded me about my unstable foundation. So, the more effort I put in, the better my foundation will become and the less hidden dangers I will face in my future cultivation." Ro didn't argue. She glanced at Chinyu, who continued to cultivate with his eyes closed and didn't urge him to rest again. There were some things that were always 100 times more precious than the advice of others. She wouldn't try to persuade Chinyu to give up. After leaving the Thousand Islands County, master and servant didn't pause at all. They hurried straight to the transmission array. As space violently shook, they vanished from sight. On this day, the Western Wasteland Imperial Capital received the final message regarding Chinyu and his 2 servants. Afterwards, the 3 of them were like stones sinking into the sea. There was no more news from them. The Western Wasteland Great Emperor thought for a moment and then ordered that there was no need to continue investigating. With the mysterious existence beside Marquis Zhongwu Chinyu, covering up their tracks was a simple matter. Moreover, since this person wanted to get rid of them, if they continued to tangle with him, it would be easy to send out the wrong signal. East Pole County City. Its name came from the great mountain at the base of the city. This was the East Pole Mountain. Most of this mountain was within the borders of the Western Wasteland. If one crossed over the summit and headed east, they would arrive at Jade Gate Pass. This Jade Gate Pass was an important area of the western borders of the central wasteland divine continent. It guarded the passageway and was said to be the most profitable business under the heavens. It had even reached the unsurpassed realm that all merchants dreamed of, lying down and making money until their hands cramped. If someone stood at the summit of the mountain and looked towards the eastern wasteland divine continent, they would discover that the eastern side of the mountain was covered in lush green trees. The trees were much taller than the western side of the mountain. This was a direct reflection of the difference in the richness of the heaven and earth spiritual strength. After all, there was naturally a reason why all sides in the world believed in the so-called divine continent. Today, the summit of the East Pole Mountain was still crowded with people. Their eyes were filled with enthusiasm and envy as they looked towards Jade Gate Pass. According to the borders, the summit of the mountain was still some distance away from Jade Gate Pass. But in order to show respect to the divine guardian, the summit was tacitly agreed upon as the final destination for the people of the western wasteland. Without permission, those that didn't hold a jade archive were not allowed to take another step forwards. A clamor of voices rose up from the base of the mountain. Everyone drew back, awe in their eyes. Several cold-faced youths stepped forwards, their clothes fluttering in the wind. Behind them were several soldiers in shining armor that dazzled the eyes beneath the sunlight. These people were calm and unruffled. Their eyes didn't look sideways, and their expressions were calm. They naturally exuded an awe-inspiring aura. The radiant armor was the standard armor of the border army at Jade Gate Pass. These soldiers didn't have a high status in the Jade Gate Pass, but even if there were some powerful western wasteland cultivators on this mountain peak that could kill them with a single finger, they didn't dare to act rashly. As for the group of youths they were guarding, they couldn't be provoked. For the Jade Gate Pass to send out radiant armor soldiers to accompany them, their background must be extraordinary. They were likely from a noble family within the borders of the central wasteland divine continent. Chapter 1645. A group of people silently walked over the mountain peak. Beneath countless envious and awe-inspiring gazes, they walked towards the sun-like Jade Gate Pass. Their figures gradually faded into the forest until they vanished from sight. The disciples of the central desolate. If I had to say, reincarnation really is a skill that tests one's skills. That's right. What is there to be arrogant about? It's just that their luck is better than ours. Sure. Everyone, be careful what you say. If the powerhouses of the divine prefecture hear what you say, you might provoke a disaster. A dark-faced youth frowned and said. After being reminded, the complexions of the several people changed. They shrunk back, not sensing anything wrong. They let out a sigh of relief. One of them bitterly smiled. We were just speaking on impulse. Thank you for the reminder, brother. Today, after experiencing the Jade Gate Pass and seeing the glory of the divine prefecture cultivators, we no longer have any regrets. After a brief pause, he cupped his hands together and said, From your accent, you must be a local. I wonder if you can guide us to a good restaurant so we can drink a few cups together? The person across from him hesitated for a moment and then nodded. That's fine. The several people turned and left. These are the cultivators of the central desolate. They are truly superior people. Not too far away, a black-robed youth sighed with emotion. The woman beside him smirked, revealing a mocking smile. Although that person was a bit jealous, he wasn't wrong. When it comes to reincarnation, it is a very particular matter. Since the central desolate can be crowned with the name of the divine prefecture, how could it be an undeserved reputation? Since they are so mighty, they naturally have the confidence to do so. The maid beside her nodded. She never asked if the reason was right or wrong. As long as her madam said it, it must be true. Chin Yu revealed a helpless expression. I didn't say anything, so why are you mocking me? Little Meaty humphed. She turned and walked down the mountain towards the county city. Baiji fell behind. After a moment of hesitation, she said in a quiet voice, Marquis, You have been busy cultivating every day." Before she finished speaking, she was interrupted. "You talk too much. Get back here." Qin Yu was enlightened. He quickly caught up and smiled. "I heard that tonight there will be an extremely lively lantern viewing festival in the county city. I just happen to be a bit tired from cultivating, so let's go together and take a look." Little Meaty's face was expressionless. She fiercely glared at Baiji, who had lowered her head to admit her mistake. With a cold face, she said, "I'm not going." Go. I've been cultivating all this way, and I'm about to suffocate. Miss Ro, please accompany me." Qin Yu's words were sincere. Ro sneered, but did not say anything else. That was her agreement. Qin Yu faintly smiled and glanced at Baiji. She lowered her head and remained silent. She did not say anything. At night, the Lantern Festival began in the county city. Lanterns were hung everywhere, illuminating the city even brighter than it was during the day. In order to attract the flow of people, the merchants who were rich and had great backing did not hesitate to spend a large amount of money to make a huge lantern that was over 100 feet tall. When it turned, it was truly magnificent. Although little Ro had a cold expression on her face, her eyes were still attracted to him, and she couldn't help but take a few more glances. When she discovered that Qin Yu was looking at her, she frowned and coldly snorted, turning her head away. Qin Yu smiled. "This is the first time I've seen such beautiful lanterns. If I don't take a few more glances today, I don't know if I'll ever see them again in the future. I will definitely regret it." Little Ro gnashed her teeth. She wished she could grab his ear and spin him around 3 times. Suddenly, Qin Yu's voice echoed in her ears. "That's enough, let's not be angry. I know that you've been accommodating me this entire time, and that's my fault. Tonight, let's watch the lanterns. Once we pass through Jade Gate Pass, I promise to accompany you to that famous immortal seeking tower and drink several jugs of God's nectar." Little Ro humphed twice and then took advantage of this opportunity to step down. She thought that this brat Qin Yu, it would be great if he could always be so tactful. Yesterday, she had overheard several cultivators chatting. That scene hadn't been too remarkable, but he had actually remembered it. This was the key reason why her mood had improved. She looked up at the lanterns, her eyes sparkling. Qin Yu now understood why little Ro particularly liked bright objects. As he saw this, a soft light shined in his eyes. Baiji fell behind the 2 of them. She quietly glanced at them and then lowered her head. On the streets of the county city, a stream of people began to surge. It was a parade of lanterns, with many people clapping and cheering on both sides. They held all sorts of lanterns in their hands and constantly changed their postures. Most of them were young and beautiful women, dancing gracefully and gracefully. There were also tall and handsome young men who were striking their shields in a heroic manner. Clapping and cheering rose and fell. Many of them were directed at the men and women holding lanterns. Little Ro was initially interested, but soon she couldn't help but frown. She glared at Qin Yu and said, "You're looking quite serious? Then did you notice that the 3rd one from the left is that little girl with long eyebrows? Her eyes are almost popping out of her head." Qin Yu looked up in amazement. He looked around. "Where? How come I don't see anything?" "Don't speak nonsense. That little girl is so beautiful. How could she possibly like me?" He remained motionless, his eyes looking straight ahead. In the parade of lanterns, there was a girl with long eyebrows. She couldn't help but bite her lips. She had been standing in front of that man for a long time. Could it be that he didn't understand the meaning behind her eyes? However, he was like a block of wood, standing there motionless. Could the woman beside him be his wife? But the distance between the 2 of them didn't seem like it. Taking a deep breath, the girl with long eyebrows moved forward. The girls participating in the lantern parade were all chosen by the county city, so she was a bit arrogant. But for some unknown reason, after she walked over, her anger rapidly dissipated and she felt increasingly lost. The girl with long eyebrows didn't know what was wrong with her. She usually had high standards, so why was it that she suddenly found it hard to calm her emotions towards this young man? In his eyes, he was just an ordinary person. She couldn't help but turn her head and look at where the young man was standing. Then she froze and was so angry that she nearly messed up her dance steps. He had been there just a moment ago, and now he had left. In such a short period of time, he must have turned around as soon as she took a step. Biting her lips, the girl with long eyebrows felt indignant. She really wanted to chase after that young man and ask him why he looked down on her. Did he really think that no one wanted girls like her who walked the lanterns? The bustling parade of lanterns went far away, with some busybodies following them. The scale of the parade grew larger and larger. Chin stood side by side with little Meaty. He pointed a finger at a shop that was making large red flowers. "It's too noisy and annoying. I think that these quiet lanterns are better to look at. Moreover, they are bright red and festive." A waiter was standing at the entrance of the shop, trying to attract customers. He was originally annoyed that most of the people had been drawn away by the parade of lanterns. But as he heard these words, he immediately smiled and gave a thumbs up. "Sir, you seem like a sensible person. You must have read many books." Chin smiled and cupped his hands together. "I haven't read many books. I can just barely recognize a few words." The waiter was in charge of welcoming customers. Although he didn't have much skill, his eyesight wasn't bad. After looking around several times, his smile became increasingly warm. "My shop has been passed down for hundreds of years and is a reputable old shop with a good conscience. All sorts of immortal treasures are of high quality and low price. How about you go in and take a look?" Chin looked at the large red lanterns at the entrance. He thought for a moment and nodded. "That's fine. I'm a bit tired from walking, so I might as well go in and take a stroll. I might as well take a break and drink some tea." Little Meaty nodded. The waiter turned and shouted, "3 honored guests, please come in." Chapter 1646. The Red Lantern shop wasn't small at all. The grand and extravagant first-floor hall was illuminated by countless crystal lamps, making it seem as bright as day. It was clear that because the lantern procession had drawn away the original customers, the grand hall was now empty. Several female cultivators in the shop were whispering to each other. One of them had a worried expression, and the others seemed to be comforting her. Hearing the commotion outside and seeing a guest arrive, several female cultivators in the shop spread out a bit and politely bowed. "Welcome, honored guest." It was normal for female cultivators in the shop to act as guides and answer customers' questions. Just as Chin was about to point at someone, Meaty suddenly said, "Why don't you introduce them?" The female cultivator that was chosen smiled and nodded. "Yes, guest." She was born beautiful, and her skin was especially white. It was clean and flawless, as if she were the most beautiful jade in the world. Chin glanced at her. He felt that there was something wrong with this female cultivator's skin color, and her aura was a bit too weak. As for more, it was likely that this female cultivator's eyes were especially beautiful. They were clear and bright, round and flawless. As if sensing Chin gaze, the female cultivator lowered her head. She reached out a hand and gestured. "May I ask what 3 honored guests need?" She stepped forwards and quietly moved to Meaty's side, putting some distance between herself and the only male customer. Meaty's lips curved up. She glanced at Chin and saw him rub his nose helplessly. Her mood immediately improved, and she smiled. "I don't have anything I want to buy in particular, so I'll just casually stroll around." The female cultivator in the shop wasn't disappointed by this. Her voice remained respectful as she smiled and said, "Then I will lead several honored guests to stroll around the first-floor hall. As for the second and third floors, they are for sale. If there is anything you need, please feel free to tell me." This was a shop called Shiyu. It sold items used by cultivators and was also referred to by the world as mountain items. There were high and low grades, and most of them were clearly marked with a price tag. This was the so-called you got what you paid for. In Qin Yu's eyes, although there was a bit of a premium, it could be considered fair. When he tried to attract business, he said that it was a shop that had been around for hundreds of years, but that shouldn't be too much of an exaggeration. She was truly just casually strolling around. Never did she expect that little Meaty would actually take a fancy to an item. She did not say anything. However, the slight pause in her gaze was already enough. Qin Yu stopped and followed her gaze. He saw a thumb-sized stone placed atop the red silk jade box. Its surface was blue and white, but it didn't seem mixed at all. Rather, it gave off a feeling of perfect harmony, smooth and flawless. Specks of starlight sprinkled out and shone on the jade box. It immediately refracted a gorgeous halo, giving off a mysterious charm. Qin Yu pointed a finger. "What is this stone?" Although the female cultivator leading the way was afraid, she didn't show it on her face. She respectfully said, replying to customers' question, "This stone is called the Sun-Moon Stone. By chance, it absorbed the essence of the sun and moon. It took more than 1,000 years for it to form. During the day, the hall was as bright as a lamp, and at night, there were millions of stars sprinkling down. It was incomparably mystical. Moreover, this object was refined by a refining master and can absorb the essence of the sun and moon. If you carry it with you, it will have a calming effect. Moreover, it can condense a drop of the essence of the sun and moon every month. After taking it, it can enhance your soul cultivation." As she spoke, it was clear that she had put in a lot of hard work in her daily life. Qin Yu glanced at little Meaty's expressionless face. He faintly smiled. "We'll take it." The female cultivator leading the way was overjoyed. Out of all the treasures on the first floor, the Sun-Moon Stone was one of the few that sold for the highest price. But besides the fact that it was made from decent materials and could produce phenomena of the sun and moon, the so-called calming effect and the drop of essence of the sun and moon every month were in truth quite useless. Cultivators that could afford to buy a Sun-Moon Stone simply looked down on it. If it was just for appearance, there were plenty of immortal artifacts that had similar effects, but their value would only be 1/10 of its original value or even lower. In short, if she sold this Sun-Moon Stone, according to the rules of the store, she would receive a dividend. This would be able to slightly alleviate her family's current predicament. The female cultivator suppressed the joy in her heart and didn't reveal anything on her face. Her smile became a bit more sincere. "Does guest wish to continue choosing and settle the payment at the end, or would you like to settle the transaction now?" Qin Yu said, "Let's settle the transaction now." Little Meaty's lips curved up. At this time, a voice suddenly sounded out. "Hold on, I've also taken a fancy to this stone." Several people walked in from the entrance. The one who spoke was a young man in the middle. He wore white robes, and if it weren't for the fact that he exuded an arrogant and overbearing aura, his appearance would have been quite good. Beside him was a pink-dressed female cultivator. She pointed at the Sun-Moon Stone and hugged his arm. Her body swayed back and forth as she coquettishly pouted. The white-robed young man faintly smiled. "Don't worry. Since it's something you've taken a fancy to, I will naturally take it." He opened his folding fan and gently waved it several times. "Everyone, since it was something you took a fancy to first, I am willing to increase the price by 30% as compensation to you." Seeing the white-robed young man, the complexion of the female cultivator in the store changed. But as she heard these words, she relaxed. She quickly winked at the 3 customers. "Little sister Sue, we meet again today. Why are you winking at me? If you want to speak, then just say it. I won't blame you." The female cultivator took a deep breath and bowed. "Surly has an honorable status, and I am only a lowly person in a swamp. I am not worthy of such a title." She didn't say anything more, but the 3 customers could definitely sense her warning. This was all Sue Giraud could do. The white-robed young man, surnamed Li, faintly smiled, not minding at all. "Everyone, since little sister Sue has spoken, then I will show a bit more sincerity. I will increase the price by 50% and you may leave after receiving the money. This is a great deal for you. Qin Yu lightly said, I apologize. We have also taken a fancy to this sun-moon stone and have no intention of transferring it. Within East Pole County City, the Li family's second young master, Yuan Tai, narrowed his eyes. I didn't expect you to be such a bold outsider, and your appetite isn't small either. But I am in a very good mood today. I will double the price, take the money, and obediently leave. I will pretend that nothing happened today. The implication was that if they didn't know what was good for them, they would remember this matter. This Li family's second young master was truly a despicable person. Even his threats were laid out in the open. Qin Yu glanced at Midi from the corner of his eyes and saw that she was still expressionless. He understood what was going on and couldn't help but sigh. If a local snake provoked a major city, then there would be trouble. Although at worst he could kill them with a single punch, it was inevitable that he would be stained with blood. Sorry. It was only these 2 words, but the meaning was clear. Li Yuantai smiled. He opened his folding fan once more. 3 outsiders, this sun-moon stone is yours. Remember to close the door before going to bed so that you don't fall into a thief's trap. Not only will you lose your treasure, but you might even lose your head. Young Master Li, these 3 are my honored guests. Please be lenient with your words and don't ruin your reputation. A blue-clothed old man smiled and cupped his hands together. He was incomparably friendly, but a sharp light surged in his eyes. Li Yuantai closed his folding fan and cupped his hands together. Shopkeeper Zhou, I didn't know that you were personally here today. It was this junior who spoke rudely and offended you. He winked at the master and servants. I was just joking before, so don't take it seriously. Our East Pole County cities, Li family has always been very hospitable. He smiled and turned to leave. The pink-dressed woman beside him lowered her head, not saying a single word. Before she left, she couldn't help but glare at him, her face paling. Shopkeeper Zhou took several steps forwards. He smiled and said, 3 honored guests, I apologize for disturbing you. He hesitated for a moment and then turned to say, I will give you a 20% discount on this sun-moon stone. However, as for your dividends, you should follow the normal accounts. Just inform the accountant later. Su Jiruo revealed a grateful expression and respectfully nodded. Qin Yu thought for a moment. He cupped his hands together and said, Then I must thank shopkeeper. Shopkeeper Zhou bowed in return. He smiled and turned to leave. Wait a moment. Qin Yu lifted a hand and pointed to the 2nd floor. I have some items that I want to sell. I wonder if shopkeeper would be willing to take a look? Shopkeeper Zhou glanced at the comm master and servants in front of him. His thoughts stirred and he smiled. Esteemed guests have come to visit and are willing to do business at our store. That is already giving us a high opinion of ourselves. So how could I possibly refuse? Please follow me. Little Meaty said, You can go. I want to walk around a bit more. Qin Yu nodded. That's fine. Shopkeeper Zhou didn't have any objections. He reached out a hand and led Qin Yu straight to the 2nd floor. Little Meaty glanced at Su Ji. Let's walk around a bit more. Su Jiruo respectfully nodded. She led the madam and continued to walk around the hall on the 1st floor. After introducing 3 or 4 items, she hesitated again and again. She couldn't help but lower her voice and say, Esteemed guest, if you have friends or relatives in the county city, it would be best if you don't live outside. Or it would also be good to leave as soon as possible. Little Meaty glanced at her and smiled. We will consider it. Su Jiruo had an anxious look on her face, but, strictly speaking, this reminder was too much. She sighed inwardly and didn't say anything more. Bai Ji followed behind, a puzzled look in her eyes. She didn't understand why the madam treated this female cultivator so differently, but after suffering so many slaps and kicks, she had finally become a bit smarter. She knew that she shouldn't ask about matters that she didn't know. On the second floor, the white-haired appraiser saw shopkeeper Zhou and Qin Yu enter. He stood up and welcomed them. "Shopkeeper, why did you personally come? If there was anything you needed, you could have just called me." Shopkeeper Zhou waved his hand. "Esteemed guest, there are some items you wish to sell. I will personally handle this matter, so I'll borrow your place." The appraiser smiled and nodded. "I see. Then I'll be lazy and go drink some tea." As he spoke, he cupped his hands together towards Qin Yu. Then he gathered up his things and walked out. Shopkeeper Zhou sat down in the appraiser's seat. He gestured with his hand and said, "Esteemed guest, please sit. I am Zhou Yunshan, the shopkeeper of this store. I am responsible for all matters." His expression was solemn. He slowly said, "May I ask what this esteemed guest wishes to sell?" "Esteemed guest, please rest assured that my Shiyu store has been in business for several hundred years and will keep the items in my hands a secret. Whether the transaction is successful or not, I will not reveal anything to the outside world." To this, Qin Yu believed it. If he didn't even have this much credibility, then let alone having been in business for several hundred years, he feared he would have been torn down long ago and the signboard would have been chopped up to be used as firewood. Unfortunately, he had many items on hand and wasn't prepared to sell them. Qin Yu faintly smiled. He cupped his hands together and said, "Today is the county city's Lantern Festival, and there are several shops that hang red lanterns at their doors. But the one at Shiyu's store's entrance is the largest, so we came here." Shopkeeper Zhou frowned. "Esteemed guest, you aren't planning to sell it?" Qin Yu nodded. "We are the buyers." "Esteemed guest, what do you wish to buy? The red lanterns at the entrance are quite good. I wonder if there are any similar ones that can be viewed in the future." Shopkeeper Zhou lifted a hand, indicating for the guest to wait. He walked to the door and slapped it against the wall. Hum! Faint traces of light flashed. In the blink of an eye, the entire room was covered, forming a small world of its own. Shopkeeper Zhou quickly walked back, his expression solemn. "Since esteemed guest knows the inside story of the red lanterns, you must be someone in the circle. So, I will get straight to the point. How many do you want?" Qin Yu stretched out 3 fingers. Shopkeeper Zhou frowned. "Does esteemed guest know the price?" Qin Yu reached out a hand and gestured several times on the table. Shopkeeper Zhou hesitated for several breaths of time. Then he slowly said, 3 clearance tokens. "Looking at the entire county city, there are only a few that can do this. Our Shiyu store does indeed have this ability. But esteemed guest should know that the world is ever-changing and accidents can occur at any time. So, I cannot give you an absolute guarantee on this matter. I will need some time to prepare. Esteemed guest, please leave behind a place to stay. Once the matter is confirmed, I will inform you as soon as possible so as to avoid any delays." Qin Yu nodded. "There are still 10 days before the gate opens. There is no rush as for where I will be staying. I have yet to confirm. Once I have settled down, I will inform shopkeeper." Shopkeeper Zhou frowned, a strange expression on his face. Qin Yu thought for a moment. He pointed a finger outside the door. "These matters have always been decided by my family's madam. Shopkeeper, there is no need to worry. I will leave behind a deposit. I will have to trouble you to handle it." Shopkeeper Zhou smiled. "Thank you for your understanding." He thought for a moment and continued to say, "The Li family's second young master, Li Yuantai, has always been a narrow-minded person. Esteemed guest, please make some preparations to avoid any complications." Qin Yu cupped his hands together in thanks. Chapter 1647. A moment later, Qin Yu and shopkeeper Zhou walked down to the second floor. At this time, Little Meaty had chosen 2 more items. Shopkeeper Zhou glanced at them and smiled. "The honored guest is upstairs. If you sell something good to our Shiyu shop, including the Sun Moon Stone, we will give you a 30% discount." Little Meaty didn't comment. She didn't care about these things at all. Qin Yu had a good impression of this shrewd shopkeeper Zhou. He smiled and nodded. After paying the money and taking the items, the master and servants were about to leave. Shopkeeper Zhou patted his head and smiled. 3 guests, please wait a moment. I almost forgot something. Su Zhuo carried a wooden box and walked over. It was completely sealed and there was only a single hole for an arm to pass through. Faint traces of light shimmered on its surface, releasing the aura of spells. Shopkeeper Zhou explained, every time the county city's Lantern Festival is held, in order to cater to the Lord County Governor and also to let our guests enjoy themselves, our stores usually prepare some small prizes. As long as a customer buys something, they can draw once. The item isn't too precious. It's just pure entertainment. Little Meaty definitely wouldn't do anything, and Baiji was even more so. Qin Yu did it himself. He reached into the wooden box that was clearly sealed and couldn't be sensed by divine sense. He took out a white bead. After this object left the wooden box, it shattered on its own. A long red dress appeared from thin air, its surface overflowing with brilliant light. Su Zhuo gasped. She couldn't help but widen her eyes. Shopkeeper Zhou forced a smile. I actually regret reminding you of this on my own initiative. He pointed at the red dress that unfolded on its own in the air as if it was worn by a beauty. There are thousands of similar beads in this wooden box in Shiu's shop, but there is only one red dress, and the probability of it being picked is so small that it's almost negligible. As he spoke, he couldn't help but reveal a bit of heartache deep in his eyes. In terms of true value, this red dress was likely equal to the sum of the 3 items he sold before. This was no longer just a small prize. Qin Yu thought for a moment and said, I gave you a discount before, so it's not good to take advantage of Shopkeeper Zhou. I will draw again, but leave the red dress behind. Shopkeeper Zhou hurriedly waved his hand. How could that be? Shiyu's store has been open for hundreds of years, and we value reputation the most. Since your luck is good, the red dress is yours. Qin Yu smiled and didn't say anything else. He cupped his hands together and said, Then many thanks. After retrieving the red dresses, the 3 of them left Shiyu's shop. Shopkeeper Zhou personally saw them off and waved goodbye, his face full of heartache. Now he truly regretted putting the red dress into the wooden box. The only thing that Zhang Xian felt gratified about was the fact that it was extremely rare to get 3 clearance tokens. He would be able to earn a huge sum of money if he succeeded. However, time was tight, and he had to get it done as soon as possible to avoid delaying his business. Qin Yu reached out a hand and placed the red dress in front of Little Meaty. I'm a man, so I have no use for this dress. I'll give it to you. Meaty rolled her eyes. You casually drew a prize, and you even pushed it away. Now you're giving it to me? Do you think I'll take anything? Qin Yu arched an eyebrow. I don't want it. Then I can only look for a chance to sell it. It's a decent robe. Humph. Little Meaty took it. You still want to sell it? How much do you owe me now? Let me remind you, don't think of reneging on your debt just because we have a good relationship. Consider this red dress as offsetting the interest. I'll slowly settle things with you in the future. Qin Yu smiled and nodded. All right. He looked up at the sky. It's already so late. Shouldn't we find a place to stay first? Although there isn't a curfew in the East Pole County City, sleeping on the streets isn't good. Little Meaty stretched out. I've already chosen a place. Let's find a place to sit down and wait a moment. She casually pointed. The wine's fragrance is average. It's barely edible. The master and servant trio entered. The restaurant that Little Meaty had chosen was certainly good in appearance, since it was able to open on the main road of the county city. The young waiter was clean and nimble. He greeted the 3 guests with a smile and asked what they wanted to eat. But in the end, only 2 people sat down. Baiji stood beside Little Meaty, her expression calm and composed. Just bring up some food and 2 jugs of your best wine. Very well, please wait a moment. The young waiter turned and left, without any hesitation. The wine and dishes were soon served. Most of the food was simple, but it didn't lack elegance. 2 jugs of old wine were opened and a fragrant aroma wafted out. But to the 2 people who were used to drinking wine and fruit, it was only somewhat edible. They drank 2 mouthfuls and casually picked up some food. Before Qin you could mention anything about the pass token, there was a quarrel from the upper floor of the restaurant. The sound wasn't small, but it soon became even louder. Both sides began to fight, and the restaurant was filled with cheers. It was clear that those watching weren't afraid of things getting out of hand. With a loud bang, a window shattered and a person fell to the ground, vomiting blood. It seemed that his injuries weren't light. Shwa! Shwa! Several more figures rushed out, hurriedly helping up their companions. The people chasing after them all had icy cold faces and thick, killing intent. A white-clothed figure flashed and landed on the ground. He opened his folding fan and fanned himself a few times. He sneered and said, "Where did these little brats come from? You dare to cause trouble in the East Pole County City? Today I will let you know what it means to say that there is always a higher heaven." This was the second young master of the Li family who had competed for the Sun Moon Stone in Shiyu's shop, Li Yuantai. As this person appeared, several more figures appeared. They supported the young man who had been knocked down and was vomiting blood, surrounding him. The Li family's young master. TSK, TSK, this group of foreigners. Of all people they could offend, I'm afraid they're going to suffer today. In our county city, who dares to not give the Li family some face? Even if this matter reaches the Lord County Governor, I doubt they will have a good ending. Seeing that the Li family was about to attack, a young man in the crowd clenched his teeth and walked out. He cupped his hands together and said, "Second young master Li, I am Su Xianglin. I am running errands for Mr. Sunday. They are discussing a transaction with me and can be considered Mr. Sun's guests. I ask that second young master Li show mercy and not lower yourself to their level." Li Yuantai's lips curled up. Mr. Sun's people? Su Xianglin's heart shrank. He braced himself and nodded. After being kicked away, Li Yuantai coldly sneered. "A dog of Sun Yushui dares to bark in front of me, so I kicked him to teach him a lesson." 2 people rushed out and began to punch and kick. Although they didn't kill him, they weren't light either. Soon, Su Xianglin vomited blood. "Brother!" With a scream, Su Zhihua, who had changed her clothes, rushed over. "Why are you hitting him? Let go of my brother." Li Yuantai lifted his hand, a smile on his face. "Oh, so it's little sister Su. This is truly a case of water rushing against the temple of the Dragon King. One family doesn't recognize another. What are you 2 standing around for? Hurry up and help young Master Su up. If he is really injured, I will cut off your heads." Su Zhihua helped her brother up. As she looked at his pale face and the blood stains on his mouth and nose, tears began to flow from her eyes. She cried out with reddened eyes, "The county city is a place of law. The Lord County Governor will definitely not allow you to act as you please." Li Yuantai narrowed his eyes and his smile became even wider. "We didn't hurt him for no reason. It was your brother who wanted to stir up trouble. Little sister Su, don't speak nonsense. If you ruin the Li family's reputation, then it will be difficult for me to deal with you." He took 2 steps forward and reached out a hand. "How about little sister Su come with me to the mansion today, and we can clearly discuss this matter. If we can talk things out, then we will still be a family. Today's minor matter can be put behind us, and I won't pursue it any further. Don't touch my little sister." Su Xianglin struggled to move forward. With a loud bang, he was sent flying away. A jade pendant fell from Li Yuantai's body and broke into 2 pieces. He looked down at it and frowned, a thoughtful look in his eyes. "Young Master Su, this is your problem. This jade pendant is an ancestral heirloom of my Li family. Although the quality is average, it is of great significance. To my Li family, it is an object that cannot be bought with money. Today it was destroyed by your hands. If you can't give me an explanation, then I fear that even little sister Su will lose face. Su Jirua supported her big brother. She couldn't help but reveal a flustered expression. You clearly dropped it yourself. My big brother didn't even touch you. Li Yuantai lightly said, Little sister Su, although I like you, I cannot allow you to slander me. Our county city is a place governed by law. If someone tries to steal a treasure, they must compensate for it. You must understand this. Su Xianglin clenched his teeth. Young Master Li, please state your price. Li Yuantai glanced at him, his lips curling up in a smile. This piece of jade is really expensive. Are you sure you can afford it? Or do you want to pay with your life? As the Su siblings were driven into a corner, a master and 2 servants were watching from the window on the 2nd floor of the restaurant. Speaking of which, the 2 parties involved in the conflict were actually people who barely knew each other in the East Pole County City. There was no need to mention Li Yuantai and Su Jirua. They had just parted ways, and Su Xianglin and those youths had met once at the summit of the East Pole Mountain. Little Meaty had also commented that her words were sour but also reasonable. If one considered it from this perspective, today's conflict was truly fated with them. Qin Yu glanced at the calm Little Meaty. She never did things without a reason, and she didn't like to be entangled with people she didn't care about. Her behavior in the shop today had been very strange, but since she didn't say anything about this matter, Qin Yu thought about it for a moment. Then he faintly smiled and continued to watch. In this world, there were far too many people who weren't peaceful. It was impossible to manage all of them. Otherwise, if there were endless and monstrous karma involved, then even a true heaven master would be forcefully broken apart. Stop! The young man who was being supported by a friend was the one who had spoken up at the summit and then invited Su Xianglin to drink after being reminded. He struggled to stand up, a hint of struggle in his eyes. He slowly said, Today's matter has nothing to do with the Su siblings. Let them go. Li Yuantai coldly sneered. Take care of yourself first. Chila! The young man tore off his clothes at his chest. The air suddenly fell silent. On the young man's slightly sunken chest was a birthmark that looked like a fire flood dragon tattoo. Light surged on the surface of the scales, as if it would come alive at any moment and break out from his body. The Yang family's fire flood dragon. With a cry of alarm, the entire audience fell deathly silent. Countless people stared with wide eyes at the scene in front of them. They felt that today's commotion had really gone too far. Li Yuantai's complexion stiffened and he stopped waving his fan. He stared at the fire flood dragon tattoo on the young man's chest. After determining that it wasn't fake, his lips curved up and he squeezed out a smile. Brothers of the Yang family, I know most of you. Today, I am truly sorry. He simply admitted defeat on the spot. It wasn't that Li Yuantai wasn't tough enough, but that facing the Yang family of the county city, he didn't have the qualifications to do so. If he didn't admit defeat, he feared he would have to accept his fate. Chapter 1648. East Extreme County City's Li family was certainly a resounding name, but the Yang family was even stronger. Simply put, when the Lord County Governor held a banquet, the Li family would definitely have a prominent seat. But as long as the Yang family didn't arrive, no one dared to eat at this banquet. The difference was roughly like this. Having a lifelike fire flood dragon on his chest meant that he was a direct descendant of the Yang family. This was something everyone in the East Extreme County knew. With the sudden appearance of this unfamiliar Yang family disciple, there was no way for Li Yuantai to continue this conflict after he admitted defeat. It could be said that the conflict had come to a screeching halt at the climax. The restaurant owner who didn't want to offend the Li family was now wiping away his cold sweat and begging for mercy. He kowtowed again and again, his face full of fear and despair. A direct descendant of a Yang family had been beaten up by Li Yuantai in his restaurant to the point of vomiting 3 liters of blood. Disregarding what price the Li family would pay for this, as the landlord on the surface, he wouldn't be able to escape being implicated. It was impossible for the boss behind him to plead with the Yang family for his sake. He feared that they wanted nothing more than to wash away all responsibility and have him quickly die. Interesting. Little Meaty's lips curved up in a cold sneer. But he didn't know what she meant by interesting. There was no more fun to watch. Qinyi didn't know what she wanted to do next, so he took advantage of this time to close his eyes and cultivate. Pretending to sleep wasn't as good as real sleep, but it was still beneficial. It was better than nothing. He closed his eyes and opened them again. After an unknown period of time, his aura stirred, and he turned his head to look outside. After listening for a bit, he realized that someone from the Yang family had come. They didn't act out on the spot, nor did they act too overbearingly. As for the restaurant owner, who had a mournful face as if he were grieving the death of his parents, they even said a few words of comfort, saying that the ignorant weren't guilty. It was unknown whether they were words of courtesy, or if they were truly magnanimous, or if the Yang family didn't have the mind to deal with these matters right now. After all, a true direct descendant of a Yang family had suddenly popped out of nowhere. This was the first matter they had to deal with first. The Yang family led their people away. Li Yuantai also lowered his head and obediently followed behind a Li family elder, walking away from the crowd. He didn't know if it was a coincidence, but before he left, he looked up and saw the master and servants sitting by the window on the second floor. He glanced at Li Yuantai and then lowered his head without any expression. But Qin Yu could still feel the ruthlessness in Li Yuantai's heart from his eyes. After the main character left, the onlookers dispersed as well. As for Su Xianglin, who was beaten to the point of vomiting blood, no one paid any attention to him. The county governor's manor had remained silent about what had happened at the Lantern Festival. To a certain extent, this was the best decision to make. As for whether some people would lose confidence and trust in the prefectural governor's manor because of this, it did not matter. After all, they were just some insignificant people. Su Jiro bit her lip. "Brother, let's go see the doctor." Su Xianglin waved his hand and squeezed out a smile. "I'm fine. I'm a tough guy. I don't need to see a doctor. I'll be fine after a nap." "Brother, I made some money today. Listen to me. You must see a doctor first." Su Xianglin hesitated for a moment before nodding. But before the brother and sister could go far, they were stopped by someone. Su Xianglin's complexion changed. He clenched his teeth and stood in front of his little sister. But soon, he heard his little sister's surprised voice. "3 guests, you are." They were his little sister's guests. Su Xianglin's heart tightened and then relaxed. In addition to the fact that his injuries weren't as simple as they seemed on the surface, his vision darkened and he fainted. "Brother!" Su Jirua cried out in alarm. "Don't be in such a hurry to cry. He isn't dead yet." Little Meaty paused for a moment before continuing, "But without accident he will die soon." "Don't speak nonsense. My brother was just beaten up by someone. He has fought countless times since he was young, and he has always been in a much more miserable state than this. But he has always been able to quickly recover." Su Jirua quickly refuted. Meaty smiled. "Then how about we make a bet? If he doesn't die in an hour, I will give you that red dress." Su Jirua's complexion changed and sorrow filled her heart. She had an approximate idea of the price of that dress that caused shopkeeper Zhou's heart to ache. Since Little Meaty said this, she naturally had confidence that if something were to happen to her brother, she would be all alone in this world with no family. Large tears tumbled down her cheeks. She lifted a hand to wipe them away and supported Su Xianglin, preparing to find the medical hall for treatment. "If you continue to toss him around like this, he won't even last a quarter hour." Su Jirua stiffened. She placed her brother on the ground and knelt down. "I beg you, please save my brother. As long as I can save him, I am willing to do anything." He couldn't help but rub his nose. He thought to himself that this girl was quite unreasonable. Why did she look at him when she spoke? Little Meaty's lips curved up. Lend us your courtyard for a few days. Consider it our reward for helping you. She blinked. Don't refuse. When you stepped into Shiyu's shop, weren't you all talking about this when you were together? Su Jira paled. She glanced at her unconscious brother on the ground, and then at the master and servants across from her. She clenched her teeth and nodded. Fine. Leading a wolf into the house. How many times had she seen such a thing happen? But she never imagined that it would be her turn today. Moreover, even though she knew this was the case, she had no other choice. Chinyu coughed, but before he could speak, he was interrupted by Little Meaty. Lead the way. Su Jiro bit her lips. She glanced at Su Xianglin. Little Meaty lightly said, Don't worry. Since I am here, he won't die. Su Jiro took a deep breath. She helped her brother up and staggered forward to lead the way. Baiji stepped forwards on her own initiative and helped her support Su Xianglin. Little Meaty's eyes flashed. She thought that this stupid woman had finally opened up a little. In the capital city, the Su family had a small and shabby courtyard. It looked ordinary, but when one pushed open the door, one could see that it was a completely different world. The courtyard occupied a considerable area, and there was even an old pagoda tree in the courtyard. It looked like it had lived for many years, and its branches and leaves were luxuriant. There were many rooms. The brother and sister each had their own room, and the rest were empty. Although there wasn't much furniture, it was still clean and tidy. It seemed that the brother and sister would occasionally clean the courtyard. After helping Su Xianglin settle down, Su Rua hurriedly said, This is my home. You can live wherever you want. Can you save my brother now? Little Meaty looked at Baiji. She quickly bowed. Madam, I can kill people, but I don't know how to save people. Chin waved his hand. Don't look at me. My strength isn't stable right now. If there are any twists and turns, saving people will become killing people. Humph. Little Meaty coldly sneered. Her complexion wasn't too good. She walked over to the bed and lifted a hand, tapping Su Xianglin's forehead like a bolt of lightning. She turned and walked away. She took out a white gauze and began to wipe her fingers. It's enough. He will sleep for several days, and then he will wake up. Seeing this, Su Jirua couldn't help but widen her eyes. Fear rose in her heart. Could she have been tricked? How could someone save someone like this? This was far too childish. Fortunately, Su Xianglin, who was lying on the bed, had not woken up yet, but his breathing had calmed down and his pale face had regained some color. This allowed Su Jirua to truly let out a sigh of relief. But as she thought about what she would face next, she felt a deep sorrow in her heart. But what would come would come. She couldn't avoid it. She just couldn't figure out why this person would act like this when he clearly had a beautiful wife and maid by his side. Or was it that all men in the world were like this? It was just like her father. Because of his dissolute nature, he had finally provoked a calamity and caused his family to be ruined and killed. Little Meaty looked at her and lightly said, I've already saved him. I'm tired today, so let's rest early. Su Jirua's complexion paled even further. Her body shivered. I'm going to freshen up, she fled in distress. Chinyu let out a deep sigh. He rubbed his eyebrows. Little Meaty, this isn't good. Little Meaty arched an eyebrow. I think it's good. Do you have an opinion? Chinyu nodded earnestly. Little Meaty coldly sneered. Endure it. At this moment, Baiji felt that her madam was valiant and heroic. All daughters of the world should be like this. Of course, she didn't dare to reveal this too obviously. She only dared to keep this in her heart, lest she somehow anger her madam. It didn't matter if she was slapped or kicked. But if she were to anger her madam's body, that would be her sin. That night, Su Jirua was tormented to the extreme. She lay on her bed, her hands tightly gripping onto the corners of her blanket. Her eyes were wide as she stared at the door, as if in the next moment a big bad wolf would rush in and eat her up. Her eyes were wide open as she stared at the door, as if in the next moment a big bad wolf would rush in and eat her up. The next day, there was a scream from her room. Su Jirua crawled up, but she discovered that the door she hadn't locked last night was still closed. Her clothes were still neat and tidy. She carefully felt around and didn't find anything different. Then she let out a long breath. In a room far away, Chinyu opened his eyes, a bitter smile on his face. He shook his head and closed his eyes once more. In such a situation, what could he do? Should he walk over and seriously tell this Miss Su that she shouldn't be dreaming and that he wasn't interested in her at all? At that time, what would he do if this young lady flew into a rage out of shame? Little Meaty would also be annoyed, and he would ruin her interest in watching a play. It was rare for Little Meaty to act so recklessly, and it wasn't a major matter, so he let her be. From this day onwards, the Su family had 3 more guests who didn't pay rent. Su Xianglin was still unconscious, but Su Jirua gradually relaxed. This was because she could clearly see that her big brother's condition was improving little by little, that Madame's words were likely trustworthy. But that man, just what did he mean? Su Jirua blushed red. After thinking about it for a moment, she couldn't help but pinch herself. She thought that it was far too shameless for a virgin girl to think about such things. But why? She had been right on the edge of his lips for several days now, but he didn't seem to have any intention of biting her. Had she been wrong from the start? If that was really the case, then she would really die of shame. After hesitating for a while, Su Jirua saw that the master and servants weren't evil people, so she found the madam who liked to sit under the locust tree in the courtyard and drink wine while looking at the sky. She carefully asked a few questions. In the end, it seemed that the madam had seen through her thoughts, and with one sentence, she was so scared that her face turned pale. "Oh, you're talking about this matter. There's no hurry. He needs to wait for a special time before he can bear to bite you." Su Jirua didn't even know how she returned to her room. Not only was her hope dashed, but she also heard even more frightening news. What was a special time? This made Su Jirua subconsciously think of the many horror stories she had heard before, and the female protagonists in those stories mostly had tragic endings. The categories were probably nothing more than harvesting yin to nourish yang, refining cauldrons and sacrificing yin and yang. The more she thought about it, the more terrified she became. Finally, she couldn't help but burst into tears. In the garden, Little Meaty smiled faintly. She thought that this girl's willpower was really strong. She could even endure these things. She had to think of a way to stimulate her emotions. Only like this would she be able to take advantage of the opportunity to see whether what she had seen was right or not. Humph, humph, this fellow Chin, you still had some uses. But as she thought about it, if it weren't for him, then she wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. She would have been able to see through this little girl's depths with a single glance. Her complexion couldn't help but darken. She thought that she deserved to feel so uncomfortable. Chapter 1649. At night, as Chinyu was cultivating, he heard some faint movements. This time was different from the past. After a moment of hesitation, he pushed open the door and entered the courtyard. Little Meat was already in the courtyard. She was standing beneath a large scholar tree, looking at Su Jirua's room. The girl should have been awakened by pain after falling asleep. He didn't know if it was because she had experienced this before, or if she was worried that there was an unwelcome guest in her home, but she didn't dare to make too much noise. The suppressed moans were very weak. If it weren't for a cultivator's amazing hearing, it would have been nearly impossible to hear. Chin, you looked at Little Meat and pointed to the room. Did you deliberately provoke this girl because you wanted to see this? Little Meat nodded, not hiding anything at all. If I didn't see clearly, how would I know whether or not I should make a deal with her? Chin Yu said, Did you see clearly now? Little Meat lightly said, I did. Is it worth the deal? Of course it is. Meaty raised her head and glanced at the pitch-black sky above her. A hint of coldness appeared at the corners of her lips. But such a good deal is laid out in the open. There might not be anyone who completely understands it, but that doesn't stop people from bidding. Qin Yu thought for a moment. He furrowed his eyebrows. Are you saying that we ruined someone's plans? Little Meat coldly sneered. No, it's that someone is blind and wants to die here. Although the Su family's residence was in dire straits, its location wasn't bad. There was a main street in front of the entrance. During the day, there were people coming and going. The shops on both sides of the street were open for business, and it was quite lively. But in the pitch black of the night, when one couldn't even see their own fingers, there weren't many normal people who would choose to come out at this time. In particular, there were some people who were sneakily lying on the eaves. Only their eyes were exposed as they stared at the courtyard in front of them. Puff! There was an extremely faint sound, nearly inaudible in the dark night. But the flesh and blood of the person's chest, as well as his heart, had already been pierced through. The stalker's eyes widened. His Adam's apple rolled up and down twice, but no sound came out. He died where he stood. Baiji expressionlessly sheathed her sword. Now that she had changed into black clothes, she could come and go without a trace. She turned and vanished into the night. This was not the first person she had killed, and it would not be the last. Walking in the darkness, Baiji harvested one life after another. As for why these people continued to advance wave after wave after wave after wave of death, Baiji didn't care. She didn't care about these people's stories. Madame had asked her to kill all the cultivators who tried to get close to this courtyard. But tonight, there seemed to be something different. Perhaps it was because he had killed too many people previously, causing the other party to be enraged. Finally, an interesting one had arrived. In the dark night, Baiji's eyes lit up. She moved and reappeared on the long street. Opposite him stood a middle-aged man with some white hair on his temples. He held a sword in one hand and exuded an extraordinary aura. Miss, if you want to chase them away, just show them a little. Why do you have to kill them all? Baiji took a step forward. You can ask him yourself. Ask who? Of course. It was those who had already been killed by her sword. The white-haired swordsman frowned. He lifted his hand, and a beam of dazzling sword light erupted, illuminating most of the county city. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was majestic and vast. But although this sword had started with great momentum, it came to an abrupt halt. It was like a shooting star that streaked across the sky. Even if its brilliance overshadowed the stars, it was destined to last for only an instant. The white hair on his temples fell to his face, revealing a trace of embarrassment. He frowned in pain, but he couldn't understand. A sword can be used like this? Baiji's eyes brightened. If my madam says it can, then it can. She spat out a mouthful of blood and turned to leave, thinking that she was still too weak. Even if she could force herself to use it, her body wouldn't be able to withstand it. The moment the white-haired swordsman behind her fell to the ground, he turned to dust. The smell of blood filled the air. A single sword strike illuminated half the city. Such a powerful figure was naturally a legendary sword immortal. The entire East Pole County city was shaken. But unfortunately, after the strike, there was no more movement. It was unknown whether it was that sword immortal who had already floated far away after slashing the enemy with his sword. In the latter half of the night, the commotion in the county city continued for a long time before gradually subsiding. But it was destined that some people wouldn't be able to sleep the entire night. County City, Lee family. On the day of the Lantern Festival, after the inexplicable conflict, everything was calm and tranquil, as if nothing had happened. In the darkness of the night, there were still countless lights in the Lee family residence, but they couldn't clearly illuminate the entire residence. The shadows were dim, making it seem even more mysterious. The Lee family members who had woken up at night didn't receive any useful information. They all turned around and left. Because he had woken up at night, Li Yuantai was still angry. He tossed and turned for a while before finally falling into a deep sleep. When the sky was about to brighten, the door of the house in the southeast direction was pushed open with a soft creak. A woman wearing only a gauze dress as thin as a cicada's wings flashed out. Her bare feet made no sound as she walked into the courtyard. She respectfully bowed. "Greetings, my lord." "White hair has failed." The voice of the figure in front of her was calm and without the slightest fluctuation. The woman's body trembled. She looked up with an aghast expression. She was illuminated by a spot of light in the courtyard. She could faintly see that it was the pink-dressed female cultivator who had followed Li Yuantai in Shiyu's shop. At this time she was nearly completely naked, but she didn't care about it at all. Only her face was pale. Although she didn't know the origins of that sword cultivator, she knew that this person was one of the hidden cards in the Lord's hands. But now, before she could even probe out the other party's depths and roots, she had been directly defeated. The woman took a deep breath and bowed. "What can this subordinate do?" "My lord, please tell me." The figure in front of her said, "We have already investigated. The master and servant came to East Pole City to enter the central wasteland divine continent." She couldn't hear the following words. She could only faintly see his lips opening and closing. Shwa! The black shadow vanished without a trace. The woman turned and returned to her room as if nothing had happened. After another night of fear, Su Zhiruo finally returned to Shiyu's shop with dark circles around her eyes. She had already asked for several days of leave. Her fellow sisters gasped in surprise. They hurriedly asked her what she had been doing these past few days. She looked as if she had overexerted herself, facing their strange gazes and teasing tones. Su Zhiruo wanted to cry, but no tears came out. But her big brother was still unconscious at home, so she didn't dare to say a single word. With great difficulty, she found an excuse to get rid of them. Su Zhiruo braced herself and went to find the manager on the second floor. According to Little Meaty's instructions, she spoke to him. The manager's complexion changed. He glanced at her and said, "Wait here for a moment. I will go and invite the shopkeeper over." Shopkeeper Zhou soon arrived. He brought Su Zhiruo into the room. "Zhiruo, are those guests staying at your place?" Seeing Su Zhiruo nod, shopkeeper Zhou looked her up and down, a thoughtful look in his eyes. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Zhiruo, I watched you grow up, so I have some words of advice for you. If you can obtain some practical benefits, don't think about the future. People always have to look at where they stand." He could only remind her of this. As for whether or not Su Zhiruo could sense it and comprehend it, that was her own problem. After all, the other party only wanted 3 clearance tokens. This hadn't changed. Su Zhiruo nodded in confusion. When she left Shiyu's shop and was about to return home, she finally understood the meaning in shopkeeper Zhou's eyes. Her face flushed red with anger and shame. Little Meaty stood at the door, smiling as she waited for her to return. "Little girl, your cheeks are rosy today. You seem to be in good spirits." Su Zhiruo suppressed her anger. Shopkeeper Zhou said that the matter has been completed. The 3 guests can go to Shiyu shop the day after tomorrow to complete the transaction. She didn't know what they were buying or selling, but from the looks of it, it should be something very valuable. But so what? Her current situation was that of a fish on the chopping block. Besides waiting to be slaughtered, she had no other choice. Su Zhiruo lowered her head and stepped over the threshold. She walked towards Su Xianglin's room. Behind her, Little Meaty's teasing voice sounded out. "Thank you, little girl Su Zhiruo. We have been waiting for you." Su Zhiruo's footsteps were disorderly. Qin Yu pushed open the door, a helpless expression on his face. "All right, that's enough. Since you want to make a deal with someone, for better or worse, you should consider the mentality of a little girl." Little Meaty smiled and nodded. Qin Yu's complexion changed. He turned and walked away. "Stop." Qin Yu coughed. "People have 3 needs." Little Meaty coldly sneered. Hold it in. She walked over and circled around Chinyu. Sir Chin, there is something I must make clear to you. The things on Su Jirua's body are not for my own use. Do you understand? Chinyu nodded. Of course I understand. If there is anything Miss Meaty needs me to do, please feel free to speak. He snapped his fingers and flashed a meaty smile. You're right. She took a step forward and leaned close to Chinyu's ear. Tonight, how about we act out a scene where a bully bullies a weak young girl and a beautiful girl comes to his rescue? How about it? Chinyu's lips twitched. He roughly understood what she meant. He thought for a moment and made a final struggle. Do you think that Miss Su will believe you in this situation? Little Meaty waved her hand. Whether she believes me or not has nothing to do with me. I only want the process. Chinyu choked. He looked at her bright eyes and thought that he couldn't avoid this. He had no idea how he had offended her these past 2 days. He clearly hadn't done anything at all. Ha! A woman's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the sea. You couldn't touch it, nor could you guess at it. No matter how much Chinyu sighed, night still arrived. He had been sitting in his room and had wasted half a day of cultivation. He frowned and racked his brains for countless thoughts. Finally, he lifted a hand to his face and clenched his teeth. This was something that would happen sooner or later. There was no need to wait for others to urge him. He stood up and pushed open the door. His back was sorrowful and bleak, as if the wind were howling and the water was cold then. Chinyu gathered up his courage and pushed open Su Jirua's door. He looked at the clearly frightened Miss Su and then at Little Meaty, who was frowning and had a strange look in her eyes. Chinyu knew that he had been played, and indeed, with several shouts, Chinyu froze in place. Then he put on an ashamed expression and turned to flee, leaving Little Meaty in the room to comfort the Su family girl. He could faintly hear that she was saying, "With Big Sister here, you don't need to be afraid. I won't let him touch you at all." Chinyu found this strange. Su Jirua didn't seem like an idiot. Could it be that she had forgotten what had happened before and had actually believed her words? He was left speechless. However, being scolded a few times was better than having to put on a show of a bully bullying a little white flower. Thinking of this, he calmed himself down. He no longer cared about what Little Meaty was planning and returned to his room to continue cultivating. There was nothing he could do about it. This world was just so realistic. If one didn't have a cultivation, then they had no human rights. In order to one day, he had to work even harder. In the room, Little Meaty was comforting Su Jirua. She glanced at Chinyu's room and sneered inwardly. You brat, you have quite the guts. But I probably won't give you that chance. Tonight, I thank Madam for saving me. Before this, Jirua had many misunderstandings with Madam. I ask for your forgiveness. Su Jirua stood up and respectfully bowed. Little Meaty waved her hand. It's fine. I am a broad-minded person and have always been magnanimous. I won't lower myself to your level, so don't worry. She lifted a hand and pointed. But if those beautiful eyes of yours continue to remain on your body, it will definitely be a disaster. Su Jirua took a deep breath. She said in a soft voice, I ask Madam to save me. Little Meaty glanced at the extremely intelligent Su family girl in front of her. She faintly smiled and said, Don't worry, I will definitely help you. Chapter 1650. It was unknown what the two of them spoke about, but when Little Ro left, her face was full of smiles. It was clear she had obtained the result she wanted. Standing beneath a large scholar tree in the courtyard, she glanced at Chinyu's room. She muttered to herself, The good fortune bestowed by the heavens is indeed one's greatest blessing. But if this blessing is too great, so great that it surpasses the limits of one's endurance, then holding on to it will kill one. A gust of wind blew past. The old scholar tree swayed, as if it were nodding in agreement. Little Ro patted the old scholar tree. As expected, you are the most sensible one. It wasn't in vain that I spent these past few days admiring the heavens. In his room, Qin opened his eyes. Little Ro's words were naturally meant for him to hear. She was probably worried that there would be unnecessary burdens. Qin faintly smiled and closed his eyes once more. In truth, Little Ro had underestimated the trust he had in her. There really wasn't a need to explain. Beneath the old scholar tree, Little Ro curled her lips, a bit of disdain on her face. She turned, folded her hands behind her back, and hopped back into her room. They had originally agreed to go to Xiu's shop the day after tomorrow to complete the customs clearance token. But the truth was that there was a knock on the Su family's door the next day. When Su Jiruo opened the door, she saw Zhou Yunshan standing outside. "Shopkeeper, how come you are here? Please come in." Zhou Yunshan took a deep breath, a bitter smile on his face. "I came here today to personally apologize to our guest." When Qin heard the commotion, he stopped cultivating and came out on his own initiative. He frowned. "Shopkeeper Zhou, what happened?" Zhou Yunshan quickly walked forwards. He cupped his hands together, an ashamed expression on his face. "Yesterday, our honored guest had Zhou return to Xiu's shop to pass on a message. I asked her to pass on a message, but today there was a sudden change." Su Jiruo was a smart girl. She turned and returned to her room, leaving space for the two of them. Qin frowned. "Shopkeeper Zhou, please speak clearly." Zhou Yunshan clenched his teeth and lowered his voice. "Our Xiu shop had already prepared 3 customs clearance tokens and could have received them today. But for some unknown reason, the Yang family suddenly spoke up and took one more. There were 2 more. Zhou Yunshan smiled bitterly and shook his head. "There's only 1 piece left." The Li family suddenly took 1 more piece. This was originally a violation of the rules, but with the Yang family taking the lead and the Li family following suit, no one dared to say anything. He cupped his hands together and said, "This time, Xiu's shop has broken its promise. The deposit will be returned to you, and we will compensate you 3 times the loss. Please forgive us." Qin remained silent. His mood wasn't too good. Right now, the most precious thing to him was time. If they could not obtain the pass, they would have to wait for the next opening of the Jade Gate, which would delay them for at least a month. Compensation would be meaningless. He waved his hand. "Shopkeeper Zhou, have all the passes from the prefecture city been distributed? I wonder if you can tell me if there's anyone who still has some money on hand? We're willing to buy it at a high price." In truth, there was no need for things to be so troublesome. As long as Qin revealed his identity, the county governor's mansion would quickly deliver the pass to him. Let alone 3 or 5, they could even double the amount. After all, this was a highly profitable transaction, and it was being carried out right under the eyes of the county governor's mansion. Qin didn't believe that they weren't secretly involved. But when they entered the central desolate, in order to play it safe, the master and servants had decided from the start that they would not be tainted by the shadow of the Western Desolate Empire. They would purely use their identities as stowaways. This would make it easier for them to act in the future, and they would avoid any future troubles because of a temporary convenience. Thus, there was the matter of Midi concealing their tracks and vanishing from the sight of the Western Desolate. Zhou Yunshan hesitated for a moment. The Li family's second young master, Li Yuantai, announced that he had 2 passes and was willing to sell them. He glanced at Qin. "Guest, you should also be able to see that there is something strange about this matter. But if you say that it was just because of a little conflict in Xiu's shop that something like this happened, that doesn't make sense." Shopkeeper Zhou revealed a probing expression. He was likely suspecting that there was some other connection between the 2 sides. Otherwise, for such an obvious design, it was clear that there was a problem. A sharp light flashed deep in Qin eyes. He thought back to what Midi had said about someone offering a price. He thought back to when he was in Xiu's shop and the conflict that occurred because of the Sun Moonstone. There seemed to be a hidden thread here. If it was related to the Li family, then today's matter could be explained in these past days Qin Yu hadn't counted how many people Baiji had killed. After the sword cultivator was killed in the middle of the night, there was a day of peace and quiet. But the other side clearly hadn't given up. They simply changed their routine and started over. His thoughts raced. Qin Yu slowly said, "Let's not talk about the deposit for now. I ask shopkeeper Zhou to pass on a message and ask that second young master Li whether or not he is willing to sell the 2 passes in his hands." Zhou Yunshan hesitated. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. Qin Yu smiled. He waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, this is my decision. No matter what the result is, it will not implicate Xiu's shop." After his thoughts were seen through, Zhou Yunshan revealed an awkward expression. In the end, he was a seasoned character and soon composed himself. "Thank you for your understanding. In truth, we businessmen don't want to be entangled in a vortex of trouble." He took a deep breath and said, "Xiu's shop will do its best to help you deal with this matter. Before nightfall, there will be news." Zhou Yunshan bid his farewells and left. Qin Yu stood beneath the large scholar tree. His eyes narrowed and other thoughts flashed through his mind. For instance, the Yang family's sudden move. For instance, how did the Li family know that they just happened to need 3 passes? The meaning behind all of this was different as he thought about it. Even the sincere and ashamed shopkeeper, Zhou, that had revealed a trace of so-called magnanimity before leaving seemed a bit ridiculous and laughable. Xiu's shop, interesting. Midi pushed open the door and walked over to the old scholar tree. She looked up at the skies and lightly said, "For this matter, it's normal for there to be an accident. If things really went smoothly, then I wouldn't think it appropriate." Qin Yu earnestly said, "Kill less people. This time we are going out to do something great. If we cause too much noise, that would be bad." Midi nodded. "Don't worry. I have more experience than you in dealing with this sort of matter." As expected, before the skies darkened, another person came to Xiu's shop. This time, it wasn't shopkeeper Zhou, but a steward. According to what he said, shopkeeper Zhou was suddenly tied down by some matters and had sent him to apologize to the 3 guests. He also insisted on returning the 3 times deposit. The steward said that the Li family's second young master wasn't sincere at all. If the 3 guests weren't in a hurry, they could patiently wait a month and Xiu's shop would surely obtain 3 passes and sell them to them at a 10% discount. Qin Yu waved his hand. "We are in a hurry, so I ask the steward to directly state what second young master Li's offer is." The steward hesitated for a moment. He forced a smile and said, "Li Yuantai said that the passes can be traded, but he wants Madame and her maid to personally speak with him tonight. The price can be negotiated." Qin Yu narrowed his eyes. The steward's breath caught in his throat. His face paled and a look of horror appeared in his eyes. Although this feeling passed in an instant, the steward still revealed a deep awe in his eyes. He was a bit puzzled. Although the Li family had always been overbearing in their actions, most of them had a sense of propriety. So, why did they act so recklessly this time? In particular, this guest in front of him was clearly not someone they could provoke. He had immediately sensed this. So how could the Li family not know? But these matters weren't something that a steward of Xiu's shop like him had the qualifications to ponder and explore. He could only pretend that he didn't know. "Go back and tell shopkeeper Zhou to tell Li Yuantai that we agree to his request." Midi pushed open the door, her expression calm. Qin Yu frowned. Before he could speak, he was interrupted by her glare. The steward wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. He didn't dare to stay any longer. He bowed and hurried away. "I don't think it's appropriate," Qin Yu said. Midi curled her lips. "What's inappropriate about it?" She looked Qin Yu up and down several times. "You shouldn't be worried about your face, right? Or do you think I care about such a minor matter? A minor matter." Qin Yu coughed, not speaking. But the meaning behind his eyes was clear. "If you really don't care, why are you saying such things?" I haven't even said anything yet. Humph. Meaty coldly sneered. You don't need to worry about this matter. I will naturally handle it. As for the Sioux family's little girl, watch her well tonight. Don't let anything happen to her. Otherwise it will be your own problem. Chinyu nodded. He thought for a moment and earnestly said, Don't forget what I told you before. Don't cause too much of a ruckus. Meaty turned and left. You talk too much. Li family. After receiving the message from Xiu's shop, Li Yuantai was stunned. He didn't think that they would agree so easily. Originally, this was only a pretense. He had prepared many other methods to amuse these three outsiders so that they could truly experience the hospitality of the Li family. The pink-dressed female cultivator moved closer to his ear and whispered a few words. Li Yuantai thought for a moment and then smiled. Good. Since they have agreed, then send someone to invite them. If they really can let me enjoy myself tonight, then I won't mind giving them the pass. As he spoke, he reached out and pinched the pink-dressed female cultivator's round and tight bottom. You aren't allowed to leave tonight either. This young master wants to hold a grand banquet to appreciate all the beauties. This caused the pink-dressed female cultivator to pout. She hugged him and swayed back and forth. Li Yuantai laughed out loud, as if he didn't notice the cold chill that appeared deep in her eyes. And in fact, the pink-dressed female cultivator also didn't notice that as Li Yuantai laughed, there was a mocking smile on his face. He wasn't a fool. He naturally noticed all the strange things happening around him. But the people of the Li family, including his parents and his big brother, all turned a blind eye to this. What could he do? Of course, he could only play along with everyone else. Being a marionette in the hands of others wasn't something that made one happy. But life was like this. How could everything go according to one's heart? After obtaining the status of the Li family's second young master, he could enjoy a life of pleasure. Why would he ask for more? It was rare for him to be confused. A small red sedan stopped outside the Sioux family's gates. Little Ruro brought Baiji out and sat down. Lift the sedan. A steward of the Li family shouted out. He smiled and turned to look at Chinyu at the door. He respectfully said, Mister, please rest assured. My family's young master has said that he will deliver the madams and madams back in good condition tomorrow morning. You should rest early. Chinyu narrowed his eyes. Hiding behind the door, Sujurua's eyes widened with disbelief. In particular, as she saw Chinyu not moving at all, she couldn't help but reveal a look of disdain. That's right, in her opinion, the three guests of her family were indeed unusual. But so what? The one who came tonight was the Li family steward. After entering that great mansion, even if they had transcendent abilities, they wouldn't be able to display them. They could only be fish on the chopping block. Chinyu turned and met the eyes of the Sioux family's young miss. He nodded and walked away. Hey! Sujuruo shouted. Chinyu stopped and turned his head, a puzzled look in his eyes. Sujuruo clenched her teeth. Although I don't know what you want to do, or what you are relying on, if your madam and maid enter the Li family, they will definitely suffer grievances. You should clearly consider this. Chinyu smiled. Thank you for your concern. He walked away. After several steps, he stopped. Tonight, there might be some movement. Miss Su, you should stay in your room. Sujuruo's eyes widened. She had already explained the situation so clearly, and yet this person was still in the mood to say such things. Movement. What movement? To see you howl in pain in the middle of the night and hit your head against a tree? What sort of man was this? Even if there really was something going on, he should be the one taking the lead. What sort of ability was having a woman go out to shield herself from the wind and rain? Chapter 1651. Returning to his room, Chinyu rubbed his nose, a helpless smile on his lips. He didn't know how deep the Li family's mansion was, or what sort of cards they were hiding. But they would soon understand what it meant to invite a god in, but send him away. Chinyu had never worried about Meaty. Even if she had lost something, It wasn't something that a merely family could shake. But in life, there were many paths beneath one's feet. Since it was one's own choice, they would have to bear the corresponding price. Qin Yu shook his head and closed his eyes to cultivate. But for some reason, the Li family steward's eyes kept appearing in his mind, like a mosquito that wouldn't budge. He opened his eyes and let out a deep breath, as he thought his heart cultivation was lacking. Even such a minor matter was placed in front of him. But in truth, the fundamental reason was that Qin Yu placed Midi in a very important position in his heart. Otherwise, if the two of them had just met, he wouldn't have cared about this sort of thing at all. If the Li family wanted to seek death, that was their own business. As for how Midi wanted to play, that was her own choice. It was fine to just watch from the sidelines, but now it was hard to maintain this sort of detached state of mind. If his mind wasn't at peace, his cultivation would only yield half the results. Qin Yu stood up and pushed open the door, sitting beneath the old locust tree in the courtyard. To call it an old locust tree wasn't an exaggeration. It was unknown how many thousands of years had passed before it had reached its current boundary. Plants and life forms cultivated like this. As long as there was the slightest mishap, all their years of hard work would be wasted. Compared to other life forms in the world, they suffered a great loss in terms of cultivation. But in the cycle of samsara, the heavenly Tao paid particular attention to fairness. It wasn't easy for plants and life forms to cultivate, but once they succeeded, they would often be extremely strong. Of course, this old locust tree was still far from that level. The only thing it could do right now was to flatter Midi. Qin Yu looked up at the old locust tree. He lightly said, "There might be some disturbances tonight. If I break your branch, consider it my apology in advance." The old locust tree shivered, as if it didn't dare, but also as if it was trembling in fear. Su Xianglin was still unconscious. Every night, Su Zhuo would carefully take care of him. Only after making sure he was fine would she return to her room. Today was no exception. She saw Qin Yu holding an unknown fruit beneath the locust tree and sipping on it. She coldly snorted and left. Bang! The door was slammed shut. The Su family's little girl was indeed a smart person. After establishing a deal with little Midi, and also guessing that Qin Yu didn't have any thoughts towards her, she became much bolder. Of course, beneath the raging fires in his heart, he was also dissatisfied with Qin Yu. This was also an important reason. Qin Yu didn't turn his head, and his expression didn't change. This was because he really didn't care. His previous expressions of helplessness and bitter smiles were all because he hoped that little Midi would have more fun and be happier. This young lady of the Su family might be beautiful, smart, and kind-hearted, but so what? In the end, she was just a passerby in his life journey. It was fine as long as he could have a clear conscience when interacting with her. As for taking care of her feelings, he had to explain his original intentions to her. Sorry, there's really no need for that. He drank another mouthful of wine fruit and crushed the shell, letting it fall to the ground. He muttered, "I really can't forget that look in your eyes. That's why I can only kill you. Otherwise my heart will be filled with injustice." Pieces of wine fruit fell to the ground at his feet. Qin Yu looked up at the night sky and muttered, "What is little Midi looking at? How come I can't see anything?" Beneath the old locust tree there was a stone table. It had been there for countless years and had been worn down by the wind and rain. There should have been 4 round stone stools, but now there were only 2 left. Qin Yu sat on one of them, leaning back against the stone table. At this moment he narrowed his eyes and looked at the darkness that was gradually descending and growing thicker. He placed a finger on his leg and tapped it several times. A piece of wine fruit shot up from the ground and fell in front of Qin Yu. He flicked his finger, and with a whoosh sound, the fragment of the wine fruit instantly disappeared into the darkness. Several thousand feet away from the Su family, under the shadow of a large tree, a figure's complexion changed. A certain figure's complexion suddenly changed. He took a step forward, but before he could move, His head was pierced through. Red and white blood splattered everywhere, and he fell to the ground dead. The complexions of several people changed. As they looked towards the Sioux family's courtyard, their eyes became increasingly cold. "We've been discovered. It looks like the last one won't be easy to deal with. It doesn't matter if his bones are hard or not, as long as we kill him. We'll have glory and wealth in the future." Attack! Since they had been discovered, there was no meaning in continuing to hide. With loud roars, several figures broke through the air and hurtled towards the Sioux family's courtyard. Chinyu reached out a hand and slapped his knee. Large pieces of wine fruit flew into the air. With a flick of his sleeves, they all flew away. Puff, puff, puff! Every dull thud represented a body being instantly pierced through in the darkness. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere as all life was lost. Beneath the old locust tree, Chinyu had a helpless expression. He muttered, "To send such characters to kill people, just who do they look down on?" He stood up and looked towards the skies. His eyes pierced through the branches of the old locust tree and looked at the thick darkness above. Tonight, there were no stars in the sky, not even a single one. This clearly wasn't normal at all. After hiding for so long, it's about time to make my move. Do you want to wait until dawn? As Chinyu spoke, he punched out his fist. Bang! A large number of old locust tree branches instantly shattered. His fist was like a dragon soaring into the heavens as it smashed into the darkness above. Shwa! Stars suddenly appeared, shining with a dazzling light. Endless starlight sprinkled down, covering Chinyu and the old locust tree. A faint, illusory figure appeared in the starlight. Its body was curled up, trembling in pain. It hadn't fully taken human form. There was a locust tree behind it. This was the old locust tree's spirit body. Now it was bathed in starlight, as if it were in a pot of boiling oil. It twitched as it fell to the ground, screaming out in pain. "Immortal, save me! Immortal, save me!" Chinyu shook his head. "Although I said I would break some of its branches and apologized ahead of time, I never said I wanted it to die. After all, it isn't easy for plants to become spirits. It would be too wasteful to burn it." He stepped forwards, causing the ground to shake. Great waves seemed to sweep out in all directions. With a loud bang, it was like the world had changed. The rules of the space around him were stripped away. Chinyu sensed what it felt like to attack. He couldn't help but sigh. No wonder people said that the higher one's cultivation was, the more they understood the immensity of the heavens and earth. Today he was still in the early stage sovereign realm. However, the situation in the 9 heavenly melodies realm was very different. For example, the way he interacted with heaven and earth. It seemed to be harmonious, but in reality he had opened up a small world within the world itself. He was the god of that small world. Facing someone with a high cultivation, Chinyu's method was still superficial. However, in tonight's battle it was like bullying. He raised his hand and pointed. With a light paw sound, one of the dazzling stars that appeared shattered and extinguished. A muffled groan sounded. The perfectly hidden cultivator revealed a trace of his silhouette. One could vaguely see the shock in his widened eyes. Although his technique of restraining the stars and taking them for his own use was an incomplete technique, its might was profound and marvelous, and it could be considered to be profound and unfathomable. For many years, once a sovereign realm expert fell into it, they couldn't escape easily. But tonight, someone casually pointed and directly destroyed one of the nodes of Starfall, forcing him to reveal himself. This was the first time this had happened. In particular, the other party's finger was relaxed, and there wasn't the slightest bit of difficulty. It made him feel a chill in his heart. Do it! According to the Central Desolate, this cultivator was called an Array Master. He was probably the key character in this assassination. With a shout, a sword light suddenly appeared. It drew a straight line and stabbed towards Chinyu's eyebrows. It was as fast as lightning and arrived in front of him in the blink of an eye. But what made the sword cultivator's eyes widen was that his sword was caught by 2 fingers. It was like he had fallen into the legendary sword trapping pool. He couldn't move at all. Qin Yu glanced at him. This sword cultivator was a decisive person. With a shout, he let go and retreated. At the same time, he didn't hesitate to detonate his sword. For him, this was a fundamental injury. But if he didn't do this, he would probably die. But the fact was that even if he did this, he would still die. The sword instantly broke apart, turning into countless tiny fragments that released a terrifying strength. It seemed as if it were about to tear apart everything. But before it could really explode, 5 fingers gently grasped it and locked it in place, turning it into an ugly iron ball. "I'll return it to you." 5 fingers casually tossed it out. The iron ball held out and sank into the sword cultivator's chest. His eyes widened and blood flowed out from every orifice of his head. In the next moment, it was like he had fallen into a sea of swords and sabers. He was instantly cut to pieces. The air was thick with the scent of blood. The sword cultivator had died. The array master revealed a look of fear. Today's plan had failed. The strength of this man that was left behind had far surpassed his expectations. How was this some early sovereign realm cultivator? Even peak sovereigns wouldn't be so strong. His thoughts of killing were extinguished. Now, all he could think of was how to escape this place. Master has ordered that if we cannot kill this person, we will both die. Bang, the ground shattered. At some unknown time, an assassin that had quietly snuck underground suddenly attacked. But at almost the same time, a giant net appeared out of thin air. It was a ghostly green color, and just looking at it made one's chest churn and nauseous. But the true killing move wasn't this ghostly green net. Although it gave off a terrifying feeling, it was more like a smokescreen. What attracted everyone's attention was a nearly transparent light, silver gauze net. It looked like a woman's seductive clothing as it gently fell onto Qin Yu's body. Then, the figure of a woman really did appear. She stuck close to Qin Yu's back, completely naked. "Don't move. You'll die if you move." This was the pink-dressed female cultivator that followed Li Yuantai. Tonight, she had also appeared in this assassination attempt. Qin Yu was wrapped up in the gauze net. As he heard the whispers and smelled a faint fragrance, he subconsciously furrowed his eyebrows. After ordering everyone to attack, the array master that wanted to take this chance to escape paused. He wondered if he had made a mistake in his judgment. Did this person only know the 3 mountain-splitting axes? As a rare array master, he had a high status and wasn't someone these people could compare to. Even if he fled, he would at most be punished by his master. It wouldn't be fatal, so he naturally didn't want to die with them. The assassin's body suddenly shone brightly as a suit of armor appeared and covered his entire body like flowing water. He punched Qin Yu's chest, his fist tearing through the air with an ear-piercing sound. It seemed that he didn't care about the woman lying on Qin Yu's back at all. He wanted to kill her on the spot. Qin Yu sighed softly. The fist in front of him seemed to have sunk into a swamp and couldn't move an inch. The naked and charming female cultivator behind him was sent flying. The light silver gauze net wrapped around Qin Yu shattered into countless pieces. "It looks like you're the only ones who will be taking action tonight. But that's normal. We can't have an Emperor Realm cultivator interfering in such a trivial matter." The armored assassin didn't hesitate to cut off his arm to survive. However, he had only taken half a step back when he collapsed to the ground with a thump. He was no longer breathing. The armor that covered his entire body shrunk into a shiny silver armor pellet, revealing the assassin's true appearance. It was the Li family steward who had come with little meat and baiji. "I said I wanted you dead. How could I not keep my word?" Qin Yu flicked his finger again. A see-through hole instantly appeared between the beautiful and pleading female cultivator's eyebrows. The one who died the worst was the array master. He had used some unknown method to break through space and escape. He had almost succeeded. But since he had almost succeeded, It meant that Chinyu had used his full strength. Space distorted, and the Array Master was instantly pulverized. He had advised Little Meat not to kill too many people to avoid causing too much of a commotion. But in the blink of an eye, a large group of people had died. Chinyu shook his head inwardly and turned around with a smile. Why haven't you done anything yet? Chapter 1652. The Ancient Scholar Tree shivered. There was a deathly silence in the courtyard. Chinyu calmly looked at it, his eyes gradually deepening. After several breaths of time, the Ancient Scholar Tree's true form that appeared suddenly solidified. It was a handsome blue-robed man with a scholar tree staff on his back. At this time his eyebrows were furrowed together, a puzzled look on his face. How did you discover me? Chinyu smiled. From the first moment I entered. Otherwise, why do you think that person that you were so afraid of was always watching the heavens from beneath a tree? At the start, I couldn't figure it out either. I only thought that a scholar tree that had cultivated to a high level might be hiding itself to protect itself. But just now, although you didn't do anything, you still revealed a trace of your aura, and it was caught by me. The Ancient Scholar Tree Man bitterly smiled. When you stepped into the Sioux family, I already guessed that there would be a change in my plans. Time and fate are truly unfathomable. This is likely the evolution of the heavenly Tao, the endless multiplication of veins. Chinyu said, I don't understand what you're saying, but you still haven't answered my question. The Ancient Scholar, Tree Man, fell silent for a moment. Because I don't dare. He raised his hand and pointed at the space in front of him. An early-stage sovereign realm expert is actually able to divide a small world. That's fine. After all, there are always outstanding people in the world. But how did you become the god of this small world? I can't figure this out. Chinyu's eyes were calm. You know many things, and your vision is not something that a scholar tree spirit in the East Pole County City should have. Are you using this to remind me that your background is extraordinary and that you have a powerful backer behind you? Do you want me to carefully consider how to deal with you? The scholar tree spirit smiled and cupped his hands together. Your wisdom is superb. I am indeed not a native of the East Pole County City, and this ancient scholar tree is not my main body. It is only a body that I have borrowed to live in. Chinyu thought for a moment. Then he turned and sat down. If you have anything else to say, say it all at once. Remember to think it over carefully and don't hide anything. Otherwise, if you lose your life, don't blame me for not warning you ahead of time. The scholar tree spirit's smile paused and he furrowed his eyebrows. A solemn look appeared on his face. He glanced at Chinyu sitting on the stone bench and hesitated for several breaths of time before slowly saying, My master is a great person of the central, desolate, divine continent. 1,000 years ago, he was able to find some clues. Thus, he sent a divine avatar to the Sioux family of the East Pole County City to reside in this ancient scholar tree and secretly look after the Sioux family while waiting for the right time to arrive. This opportunity is related to my master's cultivation of the great Tao, and it is something that he must obtain. If you are willing to take a step back, you will definitely receive my master's gratitude. In the future, when you enter the Central Wasteland Divine Prefecture, you can pay a visit to the Drifting Cloud Peak and form a good relationship. It will naturally be of great benefit to you when you travel the Central Wasteland in the future. Chinyu fell silent. He tapped his fingers on the table, as if he hadn't imagined that the other party would be a great person of the Central Wasteland. Thus he fell into a dilemma. A smile appeared on the scholar tree spirit's face, and his tone became even more relaxed. I will let you know that my true body is a 10,000-year-old black scholar tree. Now that my divine avatar has descended, its strength is less than 1/10 of my true body's. As for my realm and strength, when compared to my master's, I am extremely weak. With a flick of my sleeve, I will be reduced to powder. Chinyu looked up. Emperor realm. The scholar tree spirit smiled but didn't speak. Chinyu nodded. Thank you. The scholar tree spirit was a bit stunned. He didn't know where this thank you was coming from. What he did know was that, in order to help Qin Yu quickly accumulate his cultivation, Ruru had prepared more than one heretical method. According to Ruru, these were all compensations given by those who had made deals with her before in order to repay a debt. For her to see them and be willing to accept them to repay a debt was certainly not ordinary. For example, one of them was called Tao Tai. The advantage was that it only needed to open its mouth and swallow to convert 30% of its prey's cultivation into its own. The disadvantage was that it could only be used once in 1,000 years, otherwise it would explode and die. The reason he was thanking this locust spirit was because it had provided him with an extremely suitable candidate. Of course, this was all in the future. Even though Emperor Realm experts gave Qin Yu the feeling that they were unreasonably strong, he couldn't do anything about them. But with little Meaty here, Qin Yu felt that he could still give it a try. Of course, the most important reason was that in Su Zhirua's eyes, there was a sun and moon. Little Meaty had clearly said that not only could it speed up Qin Yu's cultivation, but it could also become the key to eliminating the hidden dangers of an unstable foundation in the future. He absolutely could not miss out on this opportunity. Since that was the case, the reputation of a Taoist expert from the Central Wasteland would not be of any use. Well, with Little Meaty's help to conceal his aura, it should not be easy to find him. The locust spirit could not understand the thoughts of the person in front of him. He instinctively felt uneasy. He took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. "Sir," before he could speak, he was interrupted. Qin Yu smiled and cupped his hands together. "Goodbye." A great fear instantly rose up in his heart. The locust spirit roared out, "I am Sweeping Cloud Peak's Black Locust Protector." He was interrupted again, but this time it was much more bloodthirsty and cruel than before. An even larger tree had quietly appeared at some unknown time. Countless branches shot out, wrapping around the ancient locust tree in the courtyard. It was like a great maw had suddenly opened and swallowed it whole. The locust spirit man bled out from his head. With a pitiful scream, he vanished into thin air. The entire process was silent. If it weren't for the deep pit in the ground, one would have suspected that everything that happened was an illusion. The chewing wine tree bowed to Qin Yu and then vanished from sight. Within her room, Su Zhirua covered her mouth with all her might so that she wouldn't scream out in fear. Her face was pale. When she was very young, she had discovered that her eyes were different. She could see many things that she didn't want to see. For instance, that maid that constantly killed people, or for instance, the slaughter that occurred in the courtyard tonight. She never imagined that this seemingly henpecked man would actually be such a terrifyingly strong powerhouse. And she never imagined that the ancient locust tree in her family had been hidden so deeply. For 1,000 years, it had taken root in the Su family. With Su Zhirua's intelligence, she could easily guess what their goal was. Could it be that the reason the Su family had declined from being a prominent family in a county to the present day was all because of her eyes? Then, in the past, because of her father's promiscuity, it led to the great calamity of the family. Nearly all of her relatives had died, leaving behind only her and her big brother. Was the reason really as she thought, or was there another hidden story? Thinking of this, Su Zhirua's complexion paled and her body shivered. Suddenly, she cried out miserably. She clutched her head with her hands and rolled around on the bed. Outside the courtyard, Qin Yu was looking at Su Zhirua's room with a look of pity in his eyes. His complexion changed, and he immediately flew out. He shook open the door and rushed in. Then he saw light gushing out from Su Zhirua's eyes. One was dazzling, with the phantom of a great sun appearing within. The other was cold and noble, with the faint traces of a full moon. This was the so-called born with a great lucky chance, with the sun and moon hidden within one's eyes. Although the sun and moon in Su Zhirua's eyes weren't true suns or moons, they still contained the essence of the sun and moon. They could be regarded as the source of the sun and moon that were formed by the fates of the world. If her lucky chances were high enough, she could refine the sun and moon in her eyes and take them for herself. That would be an unimaginably great good fortune. In the future, this world was destined to give birth to a super strong powerhouse, one that might even be able to cross the threshold of the Deva realm and reach the transcendent sovereign realm. But what a pity! This good fortune of the sun and moon had been discovered by someone 1,000 years ago. Afterwards, a plot was set up to sever Su Jiruo's road of cultivation, causing her to fall into the dust. Without the guidance of a master, she stepped onto the great Tao of cultivation. For these past years, the sun and moon in her eyes had been constantly sucking away her essence, energy, and divine. Thus, when they first met, Qin Yu felt that although this beautiful female cultivator's skin was fair, she didn't give off a good feeling and her aura was a bit weak. As Little Meaty had said, if a lucky chance was too great, it would be hard to hold on to it. If she continued to forcefully take it, she would die. The current Su Jiruo could only hand over the sun and moon in her eyes to preserve her life. But tonight, with her mind shaken, she stirred up the fluctuations of the sun and moon. She saw the scene before her. Unlike before, tonight was extremely dangerous. If she didn't have any external help, it was possible that Su Jiruo would be forcefully plundered clean and she would perish here. Of course, the sun and moon in her eyes would also vanish with her death. A massive lucky chance would return to the heavens and earth. It was unknown how many years it would take for another baby with a sun and moon in her eyes to be born and inherit this lucky chance. Qin, you certainly wouldn't stare on helplessly as this happened. He had already offended a supreme master of the Central Desolate. If all his efforts were for naught, that would truly be a tragedy. He stepped forwards and lifted a hand to touch Su Jiruo's forehead. The sun and moon in her eyes had been hungry for so many years, and now she could finally taste the delicious food in front of her. Bang! A terrifying swallowing strength instantly erupted from her eyes, firmly sucking in Qin Yu. Qin Yu's complexion changed. He said in a low voice, Su, wake up. Although the Su family's change was caused by you, it is not something you can decide. Across from him, Su Jiruo still had her eyes closed, immersed in pain. She didn't respond at all to his words. Qin Yu frowned. He took a deep breath and said, Su Jiruo, I don't know if your mind has really fallen or if you are faking it. I will count to 3. If you don't wake up by then, I will stop. At that time, not only will you die, but your big brother will also die. 1, 2. Su Jiruo opened her eyes. Although she was still in pain, there was also a bit of tranquility. She calmly looked at Qin Yu. Within her eyes, the shadows of the sun and moon revolved, as if they were gods from the highest heavens. Qin Yu's heart sank, but he didn't reveal any fear, and his eyes didn't shrink back in the least. His fingers continued to touch her forehead, allowing the terrifying swallowing strength to wildly plunder away his strength. Su Jiruo, if you want to defy the heavens and change your destiny, you can try because you do indeed have the qualifications to do so. But what I want to tell you is that it is impossible for you to succeed. Whether you continue to live or whether you bring Su Xianglin down with you, you can choose now. Su Jiruo's eyes revealed a bit of struggle. She closed her eyes and the sun and moon phantoms in them rapidly faded away. The swallowing strength that had bitten Qin Yu vanished with it. He drew back his hand and took several steps back, gently gasping for breath. From the moment his finger touched down to the moment he withdrew his hand, only several breaths of time had passed. But Qin Yu had lost nearly a third of his strength. This was more than the battle outside the courtyard added together. It was clear to see how terrifying the situation was. If more than half of his strength were taken away, Qin Yu would truly become a fish on the chopping block. It would be difficult for him to struggle free again. Su Jiruo opened her eyes. She said in a soft voice, You deliberately mentioned my big brother just now. Is it because you are afraid in your heart? Qin Yu took several deep breaths. He looked at her and nodded with some hesitation. That's right. I am a bit nervous. You will take a risk. After listening to this, Su Zhihua fell onto her bed and fell unconscious. Qin Yu took a deep breath. He turned and walked out of the courtyard. His face was pale, but his expression was calm. He really did have a way to forcefully sever the swallowing power of the sun and moon in his eyes. But if he did so, Su Zhihua would definitely die. And the reason Su Zhihua gave up in the end wasn't because she didn't dare to give it her all. Rather, she was well aware that even if she succeeded by a fluke and borrowed Qin Yu's strength to refine the sun and moon in her eyes, she would still die. This was because little Meaty would never allow her to continue living. Su Zhihua, who had the sun and moon hidden in her eyes, had already seen how terrifying this person was. This was an existence that truly left her in despair. So, when little Meaty first proposed a deal with her, Su Zhihua had nodded without hesitation. If she didn't agree, she would die. Su Zhihua didn't doubt that even if she really died, that Madame would surely have a way to obtain what she wanted. At most, she would have to spend a bit more effort. Chapter 1653. The assassination attempt against the Su family had come to an end, but the people who had been watching from afar no longer had the mind to pay attention to this matter. The Li family was even more lively. Tonight, no one knew exactly how many trump cards the Li family had prepared to keep someone alive, but the outcome was clear. All of these trump cards had become a joke. The entire Li clan's residence was as quiet as a ghost's. It wasn't that the two women had killed everyone in the residence, but it was because the two women had killed everyone. But the strange thing was that everyone in the Li family mansion believed without hesitation that they could do this, and that there was a reason for them to do so. It was only because of a certain reason that they were still alive. So all of them kept quiet and obediently knelt on the ground. Even if their hands and feet trembled, they endured it. They were afraid that if they made the slightest movement, they would end up with their heads separated from their bodies. Of course, there was only one reason why everyone in the Li clan was so respectful and submissive without starting a massacre. The faster one jumped, the faster one died. And the one who was directly and cleanly killed was the Li family's greatest source of confidence tonight. Even now, everyone in the Li family still found it hard to believe. How powerful was that person? Even the county governor had to be respectful in front of her. However, after being glanced at by that madam, he could no longer move, and his head was chopped off by that maidservant. Li Yuantai knelt on the ground, his face pale and body trembling. He still hadn't recovered from his shock. How did things end up like this? As a smart person, he was willing to be a marionette. But who would have thought that being a marionette and listening to others would end up like this? He complained in his heart. He knew that if he had to blame someone, he could only blame the person behind him. That person's skill level was very average. Or could he blame the two women in front of him for hiding too deeply? He was clearly a true dragon that could shake the earth and mountains with just a flip of his body. Why did he pretend to be a harmless reptile? Otherwise, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Suddenly, Li Yuantai's body stiffened. His face paled and sweat dripped down his forehead. Now, the gaze that fell on him felt as if it weighed 10,000 kilograms, wanting to crush his spine and bones. Hand over the clearance token. Baiji said the madam's words. As for these people, they weren't qualified to listen to her. They weren't worthy. Li Yuantai hurriedly took out 2 clearance tokens, knelt on the ground, and respectfully raised his hands above his head. Baiji flicked her sleeve and took it. Little Meaty raised her hand and pointed a finger at it. Puff! With a muffled sound, Li Yuantai's body exploded, and his soul was instantly captured, falling into Meaty's hand. His eyes were wide open, and his face was filled with terror and despair. However, he was unable to struggle in the slightest as he was completely suppressed. The corners of Ro's lips curled up, revealing a cold smile. She lifted her hand and pointed forward, her fingertip landing between his eyebrows. Ah! Li Yuantai cried out in anguish. As if he had fallen into a pot of boiling oil, his entire soul emitted thick smoke. The surface of his soul began to rapidly fester and melt. A soul fragment that looked like black jade, shrouded in black energy, flew out from between his eyebrows and fell into the meaty hand. In the next moment, Li Yuantai's soul vanished into thin air. The so-called second young master of the Li clan was a smart person who pretended to be stupid. But he didn't know that from the beginning. He was not a real living person. Even if he was willing to be a marionette, disregarding everything else and only enjoying the glory and splendor in front of him, his fate was still doomed to be miserable. If he wasn't miserable today, he would be miserable tomorrow. This was an unchanging fact. She brought the black, jade-like soul fragment closer to her eyes and carefully examined it. Suddenly, a handsome face appeared, but right now it was twisted and fierce. It glared at Little Meaty. "You destroyed my soul fragment and ruined my great Tao. This enmity is absolutely irreconcilable." Little Meaty smiled. "Then don't. What can you do?" With a flick of her finger, the soul fragment emitted a light, cracking sound. The divine sense and will contained within was directly shattered and erased. This was the key reason why she was willing to personally make a trip to the Li clan tonight. If she wanted to steal someone's lucky chance and good fortune, she naturally had to go all out. She had to obtain all of the karma between them. Only then would she be able to accomplish this. The result wasn't too bad. As for the consequences of this, in this world, there was nothing that didn't involve karma. If she stole someone's lucky chance and good fortune, wouldn't that person bear a grudge? Little Meaty didn't think that she was such a domineering and overbearing person. If worst came to worst, she could just kill him later and use him as a cultivation material for Chinyu. Then she could thoroughly resolve this karma. "I'm leaving." Little Meaty stood up and walked out. Baiji respectfully followed behind. If this were before, her eyes might be icy cold as she secretly swept over the Leaf family members present, killing intent boiling in her heart. But now, she clearly wouldn't do such a thing. The madam naturally had her reasons for her decision. There was no need for her to look for any loopholes. Since the madam wasn't willing to kill them, then she would let them continue living. In any case, they were nothing more than trash from the gutters. So what if they lived on? What could they do to overturn the heavens? As they left the Lee family and stepped through the main doors, countless eyes fell on the master and servant pair. But that was all. They only dared to watch from afar. No one dared to approach, and no one was stupid enough to do anything. Within the East Pole County City, the Lee family wasn't the strongest. But besides the Yang family, who dared to say that they could truly suppress the Lee family. If this master and servant duo could suppress the Lee family tonight, then they could easily consign them to eternal damnation. As for the Yang family, there was no enmity between them. Was it really worth it just to be curious? Or was it because they had a good relationship with the Lee family? Forget it. Stop joking around, okay? Everyone here was an adult. They smoothly returned to the Su family's courtyard. Baiji pushed open the door and respectfully drew back. Meaty stepped in. Her eyes swept around and fell on Chinyu, who was silently standing beside the pit in the ground. Looking at him, her face paled. Meaty's lips curved up in a mocking smile. "Sir Chin, you almost failed miserably. How did it feel?" Chinyu opened his eyes, his expression calm. "Very good." After a moment of hesitation, he continued to say, "Although some of my strength was taken away, that sun and moon can still be considered to have left behind my mark." Meaty coldly sneered. "Stubborn. This time you owe me half your life. Don't deny it, otherwise I will settle this debt with you." Chinyu hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Although Meaty's words were a bit far-fetched, they weren't without reason. Before this, if Su Ji had really risked her life, she would have died. But, Chin, you wouldn't have been able to stay out of the commotion caused by the collapse of the sun and moon. At that time, perhaps a small half of the East Pole County City would have been swept clean. Just thinking about the commotion left one feeling sour and refreshed. Meaty turned and glanced at Chinyu. Baiji respectfully stepped forward and took out 2 pass tokens. Chinyu put them away, a bit of helplessness on his face. He originally wanted to quietly enter the Central Desolate without drawing any attention. But things didn't go as he wished. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have gone through so much trouble. He could have directly sought out the various great families in the county city and threatened them. He would have obtained the pass tokens long ago and wouldn't have suffered so many twists and turns. But thinking about it, if it weren't for the previous twists and turns, they wouldn't have entered Shiyu's shop and they wouldn't have met this Su family girl who had been born with a lucky chance but had fallen into a trap. This was probably what it meant by, "Everything is destined by the heavens." Meaty curled her lips. She turned and walked back to her room, thinking what bullshit heavens meant. On the night of the Lantern Festival, there were countless businesses in the county city. There weren't many that hung red lanterns at their doors, but there were dozens of them. In the end, he had chosen Shiyu's shop. Was it really because the red lantern in front of his door was the largest? Meaty had to admit that this was the reason. But Chinyu still hadn't seen the deeper meaning behind it. Su Jiruo was of course the key. She was a lucky chance that no one dared to underestimate. But besides that, there was a deeper meaning, and it all depended on whether or not Chinyu could discover it before he left the East Pole County City. If she tried, the result would be the same. But if she did that, it would be a bit less meaningful. Beside the old locust tree pit, Chinyu looked down at the 2 pass tokens in his hands, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Tonight, Meaty had personally made a trip to the Lee family. Since she had said that it would be difficult to obtain several pass tokens, it wouldn't be difficult at all. Let alone 2, even if it was double or triple the Lee family who had been scared witless and would rather be investigated in the future, wouldn't be able to take them out? Clearly not. The reason Meaty had only brought out 2 was to tell Chinyu that Shiyu's shop still owed them a pass token. As for whether or not they owed him a pass token, that would depend on what Chinyu did. She wouldn't interfere. The night passed. Su Xianglin and Su Jiruo were both fast asleep. There was a knock on the door. Chinyu moved to open it and looked at Zhou Yunshan, his expression calm. Outside, the pale-faced shopkeeper, Zhou took a deep breath. He bitterly smiled and bowed. "Guest, I have come here today to apologize for my crimes. Please give me a chance." As he spoke, a pass token appeared in his hand, and he offered it with both hands. Chinyu received it and put it away. "Come in and speak." Zhou Yunshan respectfully thanked him. The deep pit in the courtyard had been flattened. Without the old locust tree, the 9 suns sprinkled down above, making the place even brighter. But now it gave off a somewhat empty feeling. There were only 2 round stools on either side of the stone table. Chinyu sat down first. He gestured with his hand. "Shopkeeper Zhou, please sit." Zhou Yunshan sighed inwardly. Today's politeness represented alienation. He really needed to figure things out. Erasing the last bit of hope in his heart, he sat down and said, "Concerning the matter of the 3 guests, it was indeed Shiyu's shop who deliberately leaked it. They borrowed the Yang and Li families of the county city to add a bit more trouble to the guests." Chinyu glanced at him. "Shopkeeper Zhou, can you explain why you did this?" Zhou Yunshan had a calm expression and a firm light in his eyes. "I apologize." Chinyu lightly said, "Since that's the case, does shopkeeper Zhou believe that by apologizing and handing over this pass token, this matter can be considered settled?" Zhou Yunshan shook his head. "I wouldn't dare to have such extravagant hopes." His complexion paled even further. He stood up and respectfully bowed. "I am willing to use my head to exchange for guests' forgiveness and to not pursue this matter any further." Chinyu had a faint expression, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. Before this, he indeed hadn't thought too much about it. But after Meaty's reminder, he looked at shopkeeper Zhou with a different aura. Shiyu's shop had been operating in the East Pole County City for hundreds of years. Who would have thought that this was the plan of some clan? Many years ago, There was once a Year hall that specialized in all sorts of pastries in the Middle Desolate. They had opened in countless cities, large and small, and could be called an outstanding shop. Then, one day, the winds and clouds suddenly rose, and the sun and moon suddenly changed. Countless people widened their eyes in astonishment. It was only then that they discovered that this Year hall, which sold pastries, had hidden themselves so deeply. Qin, you didn't have much evidence, but since both parties had the word you in their names, there should be some degree of connection between them. Was it that clan that had discovered their own roots? Qin, you didn't think so. Otherwise, this shopkeeper Zhou in front of him wouldn't have acted on his own initiative. The entire clan had already come out in full force. They didn't hesitate to pay any price to destroy the entire East Pole County city so that Qin Yu would die without a grave. After spending a great deal of money to barely avert this disaster and preserve his life, shopkeeper Zhou bid his farewells and left with a pale face. Looking at shopkeeper Zhou, who was sweating profusely and on the verge of collapse, one could tell that in that moment, other than using a large sum of money to buy his life, shopkeeper Zhou should have said something else. For example, pointing out his background so that shopkeeper Zhou, who was lucky enough to survive, would never dare to mention this matter again in the future. Meaty appeared behind Qin Yu. She sat down on his seat and frowned. You let him go like this? Qin Yu lightly said, so what if I killed him? In the end, I won this round. He paused for a moment and then revealed a smile. This is a good start. I'll consider it a good omen and avoid the sin of killing. Meaty coldly sneered, hypocrite. Qin Yu thought about what he had to do and then thought about what he had just said. It was indeed hypocritical to the extreme. He rubbed his nose and didn't speak. Chapter 1654. After the Li family's incident, the entire East Pole County city was quiet. Besides the Li family members who had disappeared, it was like nothing had happened. The Su family residents welcomed true peace. No one rose up to die again. This left Baiji a little disappointed. After Su Jiruo woke up, she spoke with Little Meaty once more. Qin Yu still didn't participate, but looking at her expression afterwards, it seemed she had accepted her fate. For days later, the 3 pass tokens in Qin Yu's hands began to shine with a faint halo of light, reminding the holder that tonight was the day the pass would open. He was secretly relieved that the sweeping cloud peak master of the Central Wasteland Divine continent hadn't arrived at the East Pole County city. It was unknown if he was busy healing himself or if he had been delayed by other matters. But there was something else that left Qin Yu puzzled. Little Meaty hadn't taken away. Su Jiruo's eyes shined with the sun and moon. He was a little puzzled, but he didn't say anything. If even he couldn't renege on Little Meaty's debt, then there was no need to mention others. In this aspect, Qin Yu believed in Little Meaty's professional integrity. Perhaps it wasn't time yet, or perhaps there was some other agreement. As for whether or not Su Zhou would be controlled after they left, she must have made arrangements ahead of time. Otherwise, if they worked so hard only to end up helping someone else, Little Meaty definitely wouldn't accept such a sullen result. As night fell, Qin Yu stood up and left. He didn't think Su Jiruo would be in the courtyard, as if she knew they were leaving tonight. After the sun and moon trembled that night, the two hadn't spoken in private again. Now that their eyes met, Su Jiruo let out a deep breath and bowed. My eyes have been clear since I was a child, and I can see many things. The Jade Gate Pass opens every month on this day. This is the usual rule. She hesitated for a moment and continued to say, on that day you helped me, and I repaid kindness with enmity. I hope you won't hold a grudge against me. Qin Yu said, don't worry. Since you made a deal with her, everything that happened before will be written off. I won't look into it afterwards. Qin Yu looked at her and smiled. In terms of credibility, you can trust me. Su Jiruo's eyes shined with the sun and moon. Not only could she see many things, but there were also many mysteries. For instance, when she was serious, she could peek into a person's heart. So, She let out a sigh of relief and bowed even more respectfully. Guest, I wish you a smooth journey. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. Thank you for your auspicious words. Baiji pushed the door and respectfully stepped aside. Meaty stepped out. Are you done whispering? Miss Su seems to be very reluctant to part with him. Why don't we wait a little longer? Su Jirwa blushed, but she did not say anything. She bowed and returned to her room. Qin Yu said, let's go. It's not good to have someone wait for us. Meaty sneered. I'm worried that someone will fall for the honey trap and change their mind at the last minute, ruining the previous plan. Qin Yu pretended as if he didn't hear anything. He turned and walked out. As he pushed open the door, he thought about how he hadn't offended her these past few days. As they left the courtyard, Baiji walked behind Qin Yu. She coughed and said, Immortal seeking tower. Qin Yu faintly frowned. Then, a look of understanding crossed his face. He turned to look at little Meaty, who had a grim expression on her face. He helplessly said, Since I have agreed to something, I will naturally keep my word. But we have to wait until we smoothly enter the Jade Gate Pass before we talk about the God's Nectar, right? Little Meat looked at Baiji and said, Your tongue is so long. Why don't I help you pull it out? Baiji's face turned pale, and she hurriedly lowered her head. Humph! Little Meat stepped forwards. Qin Yu helplessly shook his head. He was well aware that the God's Nectar was only an excuse. The crux of the problem was that he had been cultivating in seclusion these past few days and hadn't shown himself outside. This was a difficult problem. Scratching his head, Qin Yu followed after her. He didn't think that Little Meat was being unreasonable. Rather, he thought that perhaps it was because she had lived alone in that pitch-black world in the past and had been far too lonely. Even after nightfall, the East Pole County city was still incomparably lively. Although tonight wasn't the Lantern Festival, there were still some flickering lanterns. This caused Qin Yu, who had been in a tense state, to inexplicably relax a little. As he looked at the back of a certain lantern girl, he inexplicably recalled the lantern girl from the Lantern Festival that day. She was certainly extremely beautiful, and with such a beautiful girl staring at him, how could Qin Yu not have a reaction? This was probably a man's instinct. No matter how calm he appeared on the surface, there was still a trace of delight in his heart. Of course, that was all there was to it. There was nothing else. There were so many beautiful things in this world. You couldn't fall in love with someone as soon as you saw them and hold them in your arms. That was far too tiring and disrespectful to the beautiful things in this world. Little Meat glanced at Qin Yu. This time she was a bit angry, but her tone was actually very calm. Who are you thinking of that you are smiling so happily? Qin Yu coughed. Without realizing it, he put away the light smile that had unconsciously appeared on his lips. I was thinking about whether or not I should buy some lanterns from the East Pole County City so that when I have nothing better to do in the future, I can take them out for Miss Little Meat to pass the time. Little Meat humphed. I'm not that bored. But when Qin Yu really went to a roadside stall to haggle with the stall owner and choose a lantern to buy, she dawdled over and impatiently said, Hurry up and buy them. You're a big man, so why are you dawdling around? I don't want to wait any longer. The stall owner beamed with joy. This miss is right. A man should be generous, otherwise he will be laughed at. Qin Yu revealed a helpless expression. He could only buy them at a high price. He picked up over a dozen lanterns and lifted them into a large mass. Do they look good? Little Meat curled her lips. They're just S.O. Then she discovered that Qin Yu's eyes had paused for a moment. Looking over, Little Meat's eyebrows rose up. She looked at Qin Yu and then at the lanterns in his hands. She didn't find any of them pleasing to the eye. Across from them was a group of women who seemed to be strolling through the night market. There was a girl with long eyebrows. Like Qin Yu, she carried many lanterns in her hands. Now, she was looking at Qin Yu and gently biting her lips. Although the two of them hadn't spoken a single word, the bitterness in her eyes seemed as if it would flow out at any moment. They were about to leave the East Pole County City, and yet they actually met here. There were definitely some surprises, especially when Chinyu had secretly thought about this girl's long eyebrows just now. As he looked at the girl, carrying lanterns across from him, he couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. He hesitated for a moment before smiling and nodding to her. Humph! Little Meat turned and walked away. Baiji glanced at Chinyu. Her eyes were as calm as possible, not revealing the least bit of emotion. If this were before, she would have been seething with killing intent. Chinyu bitterly smiled. He picked up the lanterns and chased after her. What are you looking at? You look so entranced, a woman beside her said in a soft voice. Between her eyebrows, there was an imperceptible frown. Jiwa watched as that person turned around without hesitation. She felt a sense of loss in her heart. She paused for a moment and then shook her head. Ani, I'm fine. I'm just a bit tired. Auntie Jiang nodded. She smiled and said, You probably came out early today and haven't eaten anything yet, so it's normal to be tired. She swept her eyes over everyone. How about we find a private restaurant first and eat some dishes? It won't be too late to rush to the summit afterwards. Some people agreed, but there were also some who hesitated. Auntie Jiang, the county city's gates will close at night. If we delay too long, I fear we won't be able to make it in time. Auntie Jiang smiled and took out a token. Although it was only the size of a child's palm and looked unremarkable, the women present tonight were all upper-class people of the county city. They naturally recognized its origin. Auntie Jiang has the token of the county governor. There will be no problem for us to enter and exit the city. Auntie Jiang is so thoughtful. Then we can rest for a while and then rush to the summit. Among the group of women, someone secretly frowned, but her face was full of smiles. I heard that there is a Whistling Pine Pavilion at the summit. It's a place where the army is stationed. If we can climb it, we can see the Jade Gate Pass from afar. The view is wide and clear. It's a first-class scenic spot. If Sister Jiang has the token and can take us to the Whistling Pine Pavilion, that would be great. Auntie Jiang glanced at the woman, who was of the same generation as her. The two had grown up together and were close friends to the outside world. But in secret, they had never stopped competing. The Whistling Pine Pavilion was an important military place. How could it be easily climbed? But luckily, she had anticipated this and made preparations. Looking at Auntie Jiang's faint smile after a slight pause, the woman who spoke before felt her heart skip a beat. As expected, Auntie Jiang smiled and said, Although it's a bit difficult, since Sister Rong has spoken, I will naturally do it. Auntie Jiang turned around and glanced at the women around her. Tonight, we will climb the Whistling Pine Pavilion and watch the carp leap over the Dragon Gate. Cheers rang out, apart from the woman with the word Rong in her name, who had a forced expression. The eyes of the other women brightened. They all looked at Auntie Jiang with admiration and admiration. As expected of the most famous woman in our county city, Auntie Jiang, even in the Great Pine Pavilion, she was able to bring people to ascend at night. This matter seemed unremarkable, but it represented her power and status in the county city. She could not be underestimated. Sensing the women's gazes, Auntie Jiang smiled and said, It is a coincidence that I can bring you up tonight. It is said that this time a young master of the Yang family is going to the Western Baron, so the Whistling Pine Pavilion is open for this young master to rest. After we go in, we just need to guard a table and a chair. Don't say or do anything to avoid trouble. A young master of the Yang family? The women's eyes brightened. They felt that tonight was more and more worth looking forward to. Although they were only women in the pavilion and didn't need to socialize with their fathers and brothers, they still had sharp eyes and ears. Of course, they had heard about some of the things that happened in the Yang family recently. The previous head of the Yang family actually had a son who was stranded outside. Now that he had returned to the family, he had become the uncle of a group of young masters of the Yang family. Not only that, this young master of the Yang family also had a keepsake in his hand, which was related to the succession of the Yang family head. Of course, although they knew about these things, they were warned by their fathers and brothers that they must not say a word outside, otherwise there would be trouble. The succession of the Yang family had such a big matter. Who dared to get involved? According to common sense, it would be difficult for such a troublemaker to get the approval of the Yang family, let alone stir up people's hearts. But this young master of the Yang family had done it. It was said that he almost caused a huge uproar in the ancestral temple, and several elders of the Yang family argued fiercely about him. This also made many people in the county city think if they could invest in this young master of the Yang family, they might have an unexpected harvest in the future. And this was also the reason why the group of unmarried women's eyes were shining. Of course, they wouldn't rush to do anything before the situation was clear. But if they could see this young master of the Yang family earlier and leave an impression, they would have an advantage in the future. Thinking of this, their hearts couldn't help but burn, and their eyes became brighter. Chapter 1655. The Yang family was unfathomably deep. They occupied the top position in the East Pole County City. This was something everyone knew and had to admit. Even the prefectural governor of the prefectural governor manor, who had always lived in seclusion and rarely revealed his emotions, did not have any objections. After all, the reason why the Lord County Governor was able to smoothly rise to the position of East Pole County City was because he had first obtained the approval of the Yang family. It seemed strange, but as long as one thought about the commander's tent 1,800 miles away from the East Pole Mountain, and the commander who commanded millions of soldiers named Yang, everything made sense. Of course, no one had ever admitted the relationship between the two young characters. But some things were like this, it was enough to know. Otherwise, the commander of the army could not leave his tent without permission. Why did a Yang family appear in the East Pole County City? This was a matter that was difficult to explain. Moreover, Yang, the commander of the Eastern Border Army, had a legally married wife in the general's mansion in the imperial capital. Her status was extremely illustrious. If it was really put in public, wouldn't it make that wife lose face? This was a clear slap to the faces of the two mountain peaks of the military. No one had the guts to do this. So even though this was the case, no one said anything. Everyone just pretended to be ignorant. It was also because of this that when the Jade Gate Pass opened tonight, the military Songtao Pavilion made an exception and opened its doors to welcome guests. Deep in the night, the Jade Gate Pass was still as dazzling as ever. It was like a great sun, illuminating the eastern half of the mountain as if it were daytime. But these rays of light didn't cross the line in the slightest. When they were still some distance away from the mountain peak, they came to a sudden stop. It was as if there was an invisible barrier that restricted these rays of light, forcing them to remain within the territory of the central wasteland divine prefecture. In the Songtao Pavilion, Yang Fanshan's expression was calm. He sat by the window with the best view, quietly looking at the Jade Gate Pass in the distance. He completely ignored the gazes that were quietly sizing him up. The process of entering the Yang family had been very smooth, so smooth that none of the preparations he had made had to be used. This made Yang Fanshan's heart even colder. But on the surface, he was still the same Yang family's little uncle, who barely managed to maintain his composure after being overjoyed. In terms of seniority, there was nothing he could do about it. Today, when he left the Yang family mansion, according to custom, a group of Yang family youths came to see him off. This was the first time that Yang Fanshan felt a trace of sincerity from their greetings. His heart grew colder and colder. With his current state of mind, how could he still have the thought to care about the gazes of the young ladies from the various families in the county city? Furthermore, there was already a figure in the depths of his heart. That night, with just a single glance, he had seen her in his heart. That was why he had hurriedly revealed his identity. Otherwise, his situation today would have been much better than it was now. Yang Fanshan did not regret it. Even if he had to do it all over again, he would still do it. Unfortunately, he might not have the chance to express his feelings to her. Of course, if Yang Fanshan was willing, he would definitely be able to do it. Right now, he could instruct someone to bring her here, but he would not do that. If he could really protect himself and become a wealthy direct descendant of the Yang family, then he would very much hope to see her again. But since he could not, then he might as well not see her. He drank a mouthful of tea. The fragrance of the tea filled the air, but Yang Fanshan could only taste the bitterness in his mouth. He couldn't help but frown. This scene caused several young ladies in the great pine pavilion who were secretly peeking at this young master of the Yang family to feel an inexplicable pain in their hearts. They always felt that there were many, many things hidden in his heart. Jiang Jiuyue was not among them. She was staring at the teacup in her hand, frowning from time to time or gently biting her lips. She had originally thought that after the night of the Lantern Festival, they would never meet again. But who would have thought that they would suddenly meet again today? The young lady did not know just what was hidden in that person that she could not get rid of after just 2 meetings. In terms of outstanding young people, she had actually seen many of them. The older brothers of the various great families in the city, the young master of the city lord's mansion, and even the direct descendants of several cultivation sections. So Jiang Jiuyue could not understand why. What made the young lady's heart feel empty and sad was that up until now, she had not even said a word to that person, let alone know what his name was. More importantly, she did not know whether or not the fate between the two of them was over. If they never met again after today, thinking of this, Jiang Jiuyue felt a little sour in her nose. She could not help but slightly redden her eyes. She looked down at the teacup in front of her more and more seriously, like a little ostrich burying its head in the sand. Aunt Jiang noticed that her niece was acting strangely tonight. As someone who had experienced it, she could roughly guess the young lady's thoughts with a glance. But on the surface, she did not reveal any of it, let alone take the initiative to mention it, at least not tonight. Otherwise, her younger sister Rong would probably take the opportunity to say a few words. In reality, nothing would happen, but it was inevitable that some rumors would spread in the dark. The surrounding young girls did not know how to hide their feelings at all. When they looked at the distant young Master Yang, they could not hide their emotions. To be honest, Yang Fanshan's appearance was indeed very handsome. Now that his identity had been recognized by the Yang family, it was indeed enough to move people's hearts. But tonight, Aunt Jiang's attention had not been on Yang Fanshan from beginning to end. She only glanced at him a few times. He was destined to live a short life. So what if he was dazzling tonight? The daughter of the Jiang family would not marry such a person. She took the opportunity when the disciples of the Yang family came out of seclusion and the opening of Pine Tao Pavilion to ask the county governor for the token to come here. From the beginning, her target was not Yang Fanshan. Aunt Jiang did not tell anyone about this. Even her niece was kept in the dark, not to mention Sister Rong. It was just a smokescreen that Aunt Jiang had pulled over. Jiang Jiuyue's seat was not very good, and she did not look at them too much. She looked a little lonely, which made her stand out among them. This was also the reason why Aunt Jiang had not said anything even though she had discovered it from the very beginning. Because what she really cared about was that young officer wearing armor and holding a spear standing by the window. He had already glanced at her twice. That was already enough. The children of the Yang family, especially those who were qualified to train with the army, were as firm as a rock. Naturally, they would remember it in their hearts. If this could be done, even with Aunt Jiang's cultivation heart, she could not help but feel excited. From this point of view, it was a good thing that Jier met that man tonight. Aunt Jiang smiled slightly, and her posture became more and more relaxed. At this moment, the officer wearing armor and holding a spear by the window stepped toward the young master of the Yang family, who was sitting by the window. Yang Fanshan turned his head, and their eyes met. He frowned and said, "Are you the messenger tonight?" The officer nodded calmly. He took out a jade slip from his arms and put it on the table. The children of the Yang family are not afraid of hardships. Since you have this identity, you have to bear the risks. Yang Fan's was silent for a moment and said slowly, I only hope that the risks come from the outside world, and not from someone who wants me dead. Xiao glanced at him and said, I can guarantee you that the Yang family will not kill each other. Their voices were very low, and they deliberately covered it up. The people in the Songtao pavilion only saw the officer walk over and say a few words to Yang Fan's, but didn't know the content. But this was already amazing enough. Some people couldn't help but look at the officer, and the more they looked, the more frightened they became. Jiang Jue still didn't look up. So, the officer's eyes fell on her for the third time. Different from before, his eyes lingered for a bit. The girl with long eyebrows seemed to feel something at this moment. She looked up and met his eyes and subconsciously frowned. Aunt Jiang, who was watching from the side, saw her niece frowning at this moment, but she didn't panic. Instead, the smile on her face became wider. As the saying goes, a goddess is ruthless and the most provocative. Even if you are a proud son of heaven, as long as you fall into her eyes, your heart will be scratched. In particular, Jiang Jue didn't know the inside story, and her actions were out of her heart, so it was even more touching. The real child of the Yang family, who came here with a hidden identity, had a firm will, but his slightly bright eyes still revealed his true state of mind. This was a pleasant surprise. Tonight, she hadn't wasted her effort in begging the county governor to bring her niece here. The girls next to her, who had started to pay attention to the armor-clad officer, were at a complete disadvantage from the start. Compared to Jiang Jue, they couldn't be compared at all. Humph! Jiang Jue frowned. She snorted and turned her head. She remembered that her aunt had told her not to cause trouble in the Songtao pavilion, but she still didn't like the look in this person's eyes. Although there was appreciation in his eyes, there was more of a kind of naked invasion. She didn't lower her head because she didn't want the person to think that she was nervous or shy. Turning her head to look out the window was a kind of invisible neglect. I don't like you. This was her attitude. The young man called Yang Qianren was one of the more outstanding ones among his father's many sons. He had always been by the side of the commander's tent and had high standards. There had indeed been discussions about marriage, but he didn't like any of those women. Tonight, he had been ordered to come to the Songtao pavilion. He had originally wanted to see what this girl with a fire flood dragon on her chest was like and relax a little. After all, he had been by his father's side all year round. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that accompanying a father was like accompanying a tiger. Unexpectedly, there was an unexpected harvest. This woman in front of him was to his liking. In that case, the woman was his. The corners of the officer's mouth curled up. He suddenly turned his head, and his eyes fell on Aunt Jiang. When their eyes met, the latter's expression changed, and her smile became a little forced. This woman's methods might seem smooth and refined, but in the end, they couldn't be put on the table. The smile at the corner of Yang Qianren's mouth became more and more amused. He felt that this beautiful, round woman was similar to the young girl beside her in terms of facial features. But at this time, Yang Qianren frowned. He was no longer in the mood to watch. The woman in front of him revealed a trace of panic. Jiang Jue abruptly sat up straight, her eyes widening as she looked outside. Her taut face was full of surprise and disbelief. She looked again and couldn't help but pinch herself. It hurts. It really is him. Chapter 1656. The girl's eyes were blazing, but Qin Yu ignored them. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't and he didn't dare to. But little Meaty stopped. She turned to look at Songtao Pavilion, her face expressionless. Young Master Qin, this is fate. Qin Yu coughed. You and I, of course we are fated. There's no doubt about this. Little Meaty's lips curved up. A man's mouth is like a ghost that deceives others. It really makes sense. She pointed a finger. Let's go. There's still time. Although you can't do anything in front of everyone's eyes, there's still time to say a few words. Qin Yu rubbed his eyebrows. Forget it. We don't want to complicate matters. Little Meaty said, I am taking care of business right now. Chinyu helplessly watched as she walked forwards. He could only follow. The master and servant trio walked towards Songtao Pavilion. Everyone in the hall sensed this. Sitting by the window, Yang Fanshan had a thoughtful look on his face. Outside Songtao Pavilion, 2 armored border soldiers stepped forwards, their eyes icy cold. This is a restricted area of the military. Unauthorized people are not allowed to approach. Quickly withdraw. Qin Yu glanced at the 2, thinking that they were quite bold. He secretly gave them a thumbs up. Since they won't let us in, let's go. That long-browed girl had been staring at him from just now. Her eyes were bright and bright, making him feel a bit uncomfortable. If he couldn't see her, then he would. Meaty raised her head and glanced upstairs. I feel that someone will invite us in today. Just as she finished speaking, Yang Fanshan stood up from the window. These 3 are my friends. Invite them in. The 2 armored border soldiers at the door immediately revealed awkward expressions. Yang Qianren furrowed his eyebrows. Then he relaxed and nodded. The 2 border soldiers immediately relaxed. They each took a step back and gestured, You 3, please! Aunt Jiang had been uncomfortable under Yang Qianren's gaze just now. She revealed a bit of worry. She wasn't surprised that today's matters had been discovered. After all, if the son of the commander of the army could be personally trained by him, he naturally wouldn't be an ordinary person. But his gaze just now had caused Aunt Jiang to miscalculate. She began to regret her plans tonight. If things had reached this point, there was still room for redemption. After all, the Jiang family was a prominent family in the county capital. With the help of the county governor, Aunt Jiang felt at ease. But at this critical moment, the man she had just seen had actually come to Great Pine Pavilion. Her niece's eyes had already revealed her intentions. Aunt Jiang secretly complained. Given Yang Qianren's status and his pride, how could he hold himself back now that he had fallen into a trap and had lusted after Jiang Zhiyue? Thinking of this, Aunt Jiang felt even more remorseful, especially when she glanced at the hidden Yang family disciple out of the corner of her eyes. After a sneer, the expression on her face became more and more forced. The master and servant trio ascended the rustling pine pavilion. Yang Fanshan cupped his hands together with a faint smile. You 3, we meet again. It really is fate that brings us together. If you don't mind, please have a seat and enjoy a pot of purple tea from the eastern pole mountains with me. As the saying went, purple aura comes from the east. To the east of the East Pole Mountain was the famous eastern wasteland Divine Prefecture. With such a name, the value of the tea naturally skyrocketed. Moreover, purple aura tea was truly wondrous. Not only did it contain abundant spiritual strength, but after the tea leaves were brewed, faint traces of purple energy lingered around them. When a cultivator drank it, they would feel refreshed and refreshed. In a crowded situation, Little Meaty basically didn't speak, so Baiji naturally wouldn't overstep her boundaries. Thus, Qin became the master of the house. He smiled and cupped his hands together. Then I'll have to trouble you. Although Little Meaty didn't explicitly say why she came to Great Pine Pavilion, Qin could guess what her intentions were. If someone said that Little Meaty was really here to create a chance for him and Miss Longbrowed to meet, then he couldn't believe half a word of it. Otherwise, she wouldn't have stabbed Qin several times outside Great Pine Pavilion just now. It was clear that she was extremely dissatisfied with this situation. Even though he was dissatisfied, he still chose to endure it. Thus, when Little Meaty said that she was here to take care of official business, Qin believed her, and this official business should be related to the person in front of him. But as for what it was, he couldn't figure it out. That was fine. He didn't need to think too much about it, so he could concentrate on cultivating. This was probably why Little Meaty had been deliberately keeping it a secret. Qin guessed this, so he didn't have any ill feelings in his heart. He simply threw everything to her and was happy to be free and relaxed. Yang Fanshan smiled and gestured with his hand. Qin Yu and little Meaty sat down across from him. Purple energy tea was poured into white porcelain cups. Faint traces of purple energy rippled within, seeming a bit more mystical. "Thank you." Qin Yu faintly smiled. He picked up the teacup and took a sip, his expression calm and relaxed. But now, except for long eyebrow besides Miss Long-Browed Lady's eyes, there was also another gaze that fell upon him. A beautiful girl looking at me is fine. Although I can't stop her, I'm actually secretly happy in my heart. But why is a rough soldier like you looking at me? What was the reason for that cold smile at the corner of his mouth? We've never met before. Jiang Jiu suddenly stood up. She didn't know where this girl's courage came from. Could someone have lent it to her? Many pairs of eyes instantly gathered on her face. She was a bit flustered, but she clenched her teeth and forced herself not to sit down. Otherwise, if she sat down, she wouldn't have the courage to stand up again, and it would be impossible for her to say another word to him. She took a deep breath and quickly walked to the window. Her face was bright red, and under the light of the lantern light, her beauty was indescribable. Yang Qianren suddenly felt that this girl in front of him was far more beautiful than the one he had seen before. He couldn't help but narrow his eyes, the corners of his lips curving up even more. "My name is Jiang Jiu, the Jiang Jiu of the moonlit night flowing like flowers. What is your name?" Perhaps because she was too nervous, the girl's voice was a bit loud. Moreover, her first words had clearly stated the meaning of her father's name in the past. She was embarrassed beyond belief. Her face flushed even redder, but she continued to bravely stare at the person in front of her. Yang Fanshan was slightly startled. He silently watched from the side. He had only invited the three of them to Great Pine Pavilion because his thoughts had stirred. If the heavens didn't kill him, there would naturally be a chance. Otherwise, to be able to see such a brave and truthful girl before he left could be considered a fortunate matter. Little Meat held a cup of tea, her face expressionless as she looked straight ahead. Behind her, Baiji had her head lowered. She resisted the urge to look up, but right now, in her heart, she felt great admiration towards this Miss Jiang Jiu. To dare compete with her madam, she was truly bold. And in truth, Baiji also hoped that she would succeed. Of course, she could only hide all of this in her heart, not daring to reveal it. Otherwise, Baiji worried that her madam would really slap her to death. Qin Yu put down his teacup. He stood up and cupped his hands together. "Miss Jiang, I am Qin Yu." Although he felt a deep headache, this girl had personally come and even took the initiative to speak first. As a man, how could he be shy? Moreover, Qin Yu had a very good impression of this brave girl with long eyebrows in front of him. Of course, as he had said before, this was all. But this was all. His expression was calm, his eyes were serene, and his eyes were even more serene. Although this calmness represented sincerity and calmness, it could also express some of his attitude. This long-eyebrowed girl, Jiang Jiu, had been a smart person since childhood. How could she not sense this? A trace of sadness appeared in her eyes. She wrinkled her nose and lightly humphed. "I just want to know what your name is. I don't have any other meaning." Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "For Miss to know my name is already my honor. I don't dare to ask for anything more." This girl was thin-skinned, so of course he had to take care of her. Did he really want to argue with her? Even if he didn't know how to flirt, there was still a limit. Jiang Jiu felt a little better, but she still felt wronged. Why did he not like her when they had only met 3 times and spoken a single sentence? She had asked for his name and also received a way out. She knew that she should turn around and leave. But for some unknown reason, it was like her feet had taken root and she couldn't move. Little Meat suddenly said, "If you don't want to leave, then sit down and drink a cup of tea. Is it comfortable to stand and be stared at?" Jiang Jiu regained her composure. Her face flushed red, but she really did sit down. She looked at Yang Fanshan and said thank you. Yang Fanshan deeply admired this Miss Jiang. He smiled and poured a cup of tea for her, saying in a soft voice, "Miss has such a good personality." Across from him, Little Meat glanced at him. Seeing the praise in Yang Fanshan's eyes, she lowered her head and continued to drink her tea. If there was anything else, she would stand up and leave. Although it would be a little troublesome, she naturally had to do what she had promised. At worst, she would just have to use a few more tricks. Yang Qianren's eyes grew colder. As he looked at the man across from Yang Fanshan, a chill lingered in his heart. But at this time his complexion changed as he suddenly thought of something. Qin Yu, this name seemed somewhat familiar. Looking at the master and servants, not too far away, Yang Qianren furrowed his eyebrows and his body trembled. If the name Ningqin was spoken, it would be an illustrious name within the Western Desolate. Many people had heard of him in Songwave Tower today. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his name was like thunder piercing the ears. But the name Qin Yu was so common that no one would react. This was also the reason why Qin Yu had been willing to follow his heart and tell Jiang Zhiyue his true name. But he hadn't thought that in this Songwave Tower there would be someone who could spy on Mount Lu. True face, because accompanying a father was like accompanying a tiger. Although the pressure was great, his eyes and ears were sharp. In addition, there was a high probability of passing through the Eastern Border Army on the way to the central, desolate, divine prefecture. It was reasonable that the Eastern commander, Yang Wudi, would receive some warning. As the son of the first wife, Yang Qianren had once heard his father and close aides discuss it in the commander's tent, so he remembered it in his heart. Master and servants, and also called Qin Yu. The more he looked, the more everything seemed to fit. A trace of paleness appeared on Yang Qianren's face. As the son of the Eastern commander and a general who held real power in the army, it wasn't wrong for him to think highly of himself. He also had the qualifications to look down on everyone in Songwave Tower today. That was why he had seen through the woman's little tricks. When he looked at her, he didn't dare to conceal some of the emotions in his heart. The so-called taking, the so-called and scrupulous. But similarly, according to this logic, if someone was far above him, they could also do the same to him. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. The son of the Eastern commander lowered his head, his face even paler, a fine layer of sweat appearing on his forehead. But now, as Yang Qianren sank into deep fear, there was someone who didn't think so. The reluctance on Aunt Zhang's face was really very forced, almost to the point where she couldn't maintain it. This woman, who had always been a virtuous protector of the family in the prefecture city and had great intelligence, was now on the verge of collapse. Before, she had thought that her niece was the most outstanding of the next generation of the family. Not only was she beautiful, but she also had a clear mind and acted intelligently. She had placed high hopes on her. But tonight there were all sorts of stupid moves and wrong moves, turning the originally dangerous game of chess into a dead end. Seeing Yang Qianren's head lowered in silence, his body occasionally trembling, in Aunt Zhang's eyes, of course, this true descendant of a Yang family had reached his limit. Once he exploded, the heavens and the earth would shatter. A mere Yang family could run amok in the prefecture city and make the prefectural governor bow his head in awe. What's more, he was a descendant of the Yang family from the military. Once a conflict broke out, the Jiang family would instantly lose everything they had to rely on. They would even throw stones at him when he was down, hoping to get rid of any entanglement with the Jiang family. At that time, a great disaster would come. The Jiang family, a prominent family in the prefecture city, would be blown away by the wind and rain in the blink of an eye, ending up in an incomparably tragic state. And Aunt Jiang had seen more than one or two similar incidents. It was precisely because she had seen so many that she was so terrified that she gave up her life's happiness to work hard for the survival of the family, even becoming the prefectural governor's mistress. Zhiyue. Aunt Jiang stood up, trying her best to maintain her composure. After calling out to her, she said softly, "Something happened at home. We should go." Jiang Jiue looked hesitant. She glanced at the man beside her, but before she could say anything, she heard her aunt call her again. "Jiue, we really should go." Only those who were familiar with her aunt could sense that she seemed calm and uneasy at this moment. Jiang Jiue was about to nod when a voice rang out from the rustling pine pavilion. "Miss Jiang, there is no need to leave. No matter what happens to the Jiang family, I guarantee nothing will happen." Aunt Jiang's face was deathly pale. Her legs gave way, and she reached out to support the table, knocking over the teacup and smashing it into pieces. Aunt Jiang Jiue no longer cared about anything else. She hurried over and supported the beautiful woman who had lost all color in her face. The other women at the table all widened their eyes in surprise and hesitation. Only the woman with the character Rong in her name looked pensive. She looked at the Jiang family aunt and niece in front of her with a hint of schadenfreude. She probably wanted to say, "You think you're smart, but now you've shot yourself in the foot." How satisfying. Yang Qianren didn't care about being presumptuous. If he really let the two women of the Jiang family leave in fright because of him, he would have truly committed a crime today. He wouldn't even be able to undo it. What would he do then? What bullshit son of the Eastern Marshal? His father loved to control beautiful women his entire life. He didn't lack anything else but children. There was no need for him to do anything. As long as this matter was spread to the Marshal tent, his father would be the first to act. He would cut off his head and personally deliver it to him as an apology. As for his brothers in the army, they would definitely be happy to do this. The Yang family wouldn't kill each other. This was the only family rule that his father had set down, one that made one feel a trace of warmth. But to kill someone, one didn't need to personally do it. Borrowing the strength of others was clearly a better choice. Yang Qianren paled and sweat dripped down his forehead. He quickly walked over to the window and cupped his hands together. "Lord Qinyu, I have eyes but failed to see. If I have offended you in any way, I ask that you forgive me." At this moment, there was a deathly silence both inside and outside the rustling pine pavilion. Chapter 16, 57. Qinyu frowned. He really couldn't figure it out. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "Sir, did you mistake me for someone else?" His body trembling, Yang Qianren fell to his knees without hesitation. "My lord, please forgive me, otherwise I will die." He kowtowed motionless. It seemed his identity had been exposed. Was it because of the name Qinyu? Looking at Yang Qianren, Qinyu thought for a moment. "You are a member of the Yang family?" It was true. With these words, he couldn't be wrong. Yang Qianren respectfully said, "This humble servant is Yang Qianren. My father is Yang Wudi." Qinyu nodded. "Ignorance is not a crime. Leave." Yang Qianren was startled and then overjoyed. Those in high positions needed face, and his father was no exception. Today, under the watchful eyes of so many people, if he received these words, then everything would be fine. "Thank you, my lord. Thank you, my lord." Yang Qianren stood up, about to withdraw from Songtao Pavilion. He didn't want to be an eyesore. This was something he was aware of. Little Meat suddenly lifted a hand and pointed at Jiang Jiue. "You can't touch this girl." Yang Qianren lifted a hand and slapped himself in the face. He respectfully bowed to Jiang Jiue. "Miss Jiang, from now on, wherever you are, I will stay far away." Scram! Yang Qianren left as if he had been pardoned. The Songtao Pavilion became even more deathly silent. Even Yang Fan's Han, who had invited the three up, couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock. Little Meat looked at him and stood up. "Let's go, it's almost time." Qinyu nodded. He smiled at Jiang Jiue and cupped his hands. The three turned and left. Yang Fan's Han clenched his teeth and chased after them. "Please wait a moment. Will you also enter the past tonight?" Qin Yu had seen through Little Meat's intentions when he saw Yang Qianren's thoughts. He stopped and turned. Yes. Does Sir Yang wish to accompany us? Yang Fanshan's eyes brightened. Of course. Outside Songtao Pavilion, the two Yang family companions were waiting. One was a skinny old man with a goatee, and the other was a woman with dark skin. They glanced at each other and wisely maintained their silence. What had happened in the Li family was not known to ordinary people, but the Yang family was well aware of it. Even if what had happened just now had not happened, the Yang family could not afford to offend these three. However, they did not expect that the background of these three people was so powerful that even Commander Dong could not afford to offend them. Yang Fanshan was really lucky. Yang Qianren bowed from afar, not daring to approach. His face was a little pale. The so-called instant between life and death was really just a moment's difference. If Jiang Jiue hadn't asked for his name just now, he would have completely cut off his way out. As he thought of this, he recalled the warning the madam had given him before she left. After watching them leave, Yang Qianren turned and entered the Great Pine Pavilion. Arriving in front of the Jiang family niece and aunt, he cupped his hands in greeting. Please forgive me for offending the two of you before. My name is Yang Qianren. If the two of you have any trouble in the future, you can go to the Yang family in the prefecture capital and report my name. Excuse me, I'll take my leave. He turned around and left without any hesitation. Some of the thoughts in his mind were completely wiped away. Nonsense, he still dared to have such thoughts? Was he tired of living? Not to mention retreating. So what if he was willing to give up 30 times or 300 times? As the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. Yang Qianren was not lacking in this aspect. Otherwise, he would not have knelt on the ground and begged for mercy as soon as he sensed something. This could be considered a powerful survival skill. As for whether Yang Fanshan had managed to avert danger this time or had other fortuitous encounters, he did not care. But this matter had to be reported to his father as soon as possible. Regarding this, Yang Qianren did not have the slightest bit of luck. Taking the initiative to speak might be meritorious, but if he was lucky he could avoid death. But he could not escape punishment. Leaving the Great Pine Pavilion, Yang Qianren mounted his horse and galloped away with his men. Inside the pavilion, the people who had finally recovered from their daze all had complicated expressions on their faces. No one had thought that the situation would take such a turn and suddenly turn into the current situation. Jiang Jiue's insight was actually much better than her astute aunt's. In the vast sea of people, they had only met once or twice from afar. But she could actually see that the man was not ordinary. A big shot, an absolute big shot. Even the great Commander Wudi in the Eastern Border Army's tent had to be wary of him. Otherwise, as the great commander's son, Yang Qianren would not have such an attitude, almost in fear and trepidation, begging for mercy. Today, receiving Yang Qianren's promise was tantamount to putting his name in front of Eastern Commander Yang Wudi. In the future, in addition to the Yang and Li families, there would most likely be another Jiang family in the East Pole Commandery. And the Li family had been in constant turmoil recently. There was no telling what would happen in the future. Perhaps the Jiang family could seize the opportunity to replace them. Thinking of this, the people's gazes converged with more envy. Of course, there was more jealousy, but they did not dare to show it. Aunt Jiang grabbed her niece tightly. Her face was slightly flushed, and her whole body was glowing. It could be said that she was radiant. She turned her head and glanced at Jiang Jiue, slightly lowering her voice. You. She seemed to be complaining, but her tone was full of pride. She was full of joy, thinking that her niece had long since discovered something, but did not tell anyone. This cautiousness was, of course, excellent. Otherwise, this lucky chance would not have fallen into the Jiang family's hands. Jiang Jiue's lips moved, but she did not say anything. She only lowered her head. The scene of him smiling and cupping his hands appeared in her mind. It's not because I guessed you were a great figure that I looked at you differently. In the future, will we ever meet again? She did not know, but she knew that keeping silent now was the best way for the Jiang family to obtain the most benefits. She was a smart girl, so of course she knew what to do. Thinking about it, when he cupped his hands and smiled before leaving, he had already guessed all of this and would not care at all. Qi knew his name is really nice. Also, my eyesight is really good. But having eyesight is also not good. Some people that I can see are destined to have no chance at all. Yang Fanshan was not stupid. On the contrary, he was smarter than most people in the world. Therefore, when he walked with the three of them, he did not say much, only chatting about the local customs and practices of the East Pole Commandery. The madam was taciturn, as if she didn't care too much about anything. After Yang Fanshan probed her a bit, he placed all of his attention on Qinyu. His words were respectful and steady, not at all out of line. He didn't know what little Meaty was planning, but he thought that this Sir Yang had some use to him. Thus, he patiently chatted with her. Since the two of them had just met, there wasn't much to say. Luckily, Pine Whistle Pavilion was located at the summit of a mountain. As they headed east, they soon arrived outside of Jade Gate Pass, avoiding the awkward situation where they had nothing to talk about. Yang Fanshan stopped on his own initiative. He cupped his hands together and said, "You three, I have an important matter to attend to, so I will be leaving first. I hope that we will meet again within the borders of the central, desolate, divine continent." Qinyu said, "Sir Yang, take care." He watched as the three Yang family members walked towards Jade Gate Pass. Then he turned to look at little Meaty. He lowered his voice and said, "Now, can you tell me just what happened?" He had gone to Pine Whistle Pavilion and nearly stirred up trouble, and had even exposed his identity. But now he was letting Yang Fanshan go just to walk this short distance? He just couldn't figure it out. Meaty yawned. "I'm tired. Let's pass a bit earlier and go rest." Qinyu forced a smile. In terms of the depth of one's ability to keep others guessing, his meaty body was number one under the heavens. Shaking his head, he gathered his thoughts, stood still, and looked forward. The Jade Gate Pass was right in front of him, and the pass medallion on his body started to glow. There was also a mysterious aura that enveloped his body. It was also because of this that they were able to stand outside the Jade Gate Pass unscathed without worrying about being burned by the light. Otherwise, they would have already become human-shaped torches. At this time, there were already people waiting outside the Jade Gate Pass. The Jade Gate Pass opened once a month to accept cultivators with pass tokens into the Central Wasteland Divine Prefecture. A portion of them were people who had received special permission from the Central Wastelands or had been chosen. Another type were people from the Western Wastelands who had received permission to send them over. Finally, there were people like Master and Servant, who had identities similar to stowaways. But no matter which one it was, there was no difference. The Jade Gate Pass only looked at the token and did not recognize the person. As long as one had the pass, one could enter. In reality, this was also a display of confidence, pride, and strength. The Central Wasteland Divine Prefecture did not fear anyone entering, as long as they had the qualifications and the guts. Dong, dong, dong. The sound of drums echoed out from the Jade Gate Pass. The people waiting outside subconsciously began to stir. The Jade Gate Pass in front of them released a dazzling light that rippled like flowing water. Then, the tightly shut gate quietly opened. Qinyu subconsciously arched an eyebrow, a trace of shock in his eyes. He saw that as the Jade Gate Pass opened, the atmosphere in front of him suddenly changed. Rich heaven and earth, spiritual strength gushed out from within, like a river bursting through a dam. It could be said that the momentum was astonishing, not to mention anything else. Just this rich spiritual strength was enough to startle one. The Central Wasteland was truly worthy of being called the Divine Prefecture. And what was even more astonishing was that this raging tide of spiritual strength seemed to be imprisoned by an invisible force. No matter how it tumbled about, it didn't leak out in the slightest. At the front of the line was a Western Wasteland person. He wore scholarly robes and had a dignified appearance. At this time his face was flushed red and his eyes were wide with excitement. "Pass!" A low and deep voice echoed out from the Jade Gate Pass. The scholarly robed young man took a deep breath and grasped the pass token in his hand. Then he strode forwards. As he stepped into the range of the tide of spiritual strength, his entire body shook. His face flushed red and his breathing became heavy. In the next moment, for lights of red, orange, yellow, and green erupted. They wove together to form the phantom of a gate, lofty and dignified, like the gates of heaven. This was the so-called carp leaping over the dragon gate. It was also the scene that the Jiang family's niece and aunt first wanted to see from afar. The scene in front of them could be understood as a cultivator stepping into a true cultivation, holy land from a land barren of spiritual strength. Because they found it difficult to adapt to the changes in the outside environment, it caused a tide of spiritual strength to surge up. Thus, this was the result of a rainbow of colors. As for the number of colors that represented a cultivator's background, boundary, and even the upper limit of their future achievements. Naturally, there was a special testing method that was extremely accurate and rarely had any mistakes. It was set up by the great Qin Empire in the central wasteland to verify those who entered. For colors was already considered extraordinary. As for the scholarly robed young man, he would likely be recruited after entering the Jade Gate Pass. And this was the reason for the carp leaping over the dragon gate scene. After the scholarly robed young man stabilized his footing, he had a happy expression, but there was a trace of sadness in the depths of his eyes. This was because, according to the plan, he should be able to stimulate a 5-colored halo of light. But that touch of blue never appeared. The surging heaven and earth spiritual strength around him gradually calmed down, indicating that he had gradually adapted. It was impossible for a miracle to occur again. He took a deep breath and walked into the Jade Gate Pass, his figure disappearing from everyone's sight. Although the touch of blue that the scholarly robed young man longed for hadn't appeared, it had already been said that 4 colors was already extraordinary. As the first person to step into the Jade Gate Pass, he was absolutely the first to do so. The second person who had fallen behind had a gloomy expression, but the order had already been decided, so he could only brace himself and move forward. Red, orange, and yellow intertwined together. This wasn't bad, but with 4 colors in front of it, it wasn't conspicuous at all. After that, more and more people entered. Even the best were only 3 colors. This continued until a sickly black-clothed girl with a pale face appeared. She stepped into the tide of spiritual strength. 5 colors instantly erupted. Red, orange, yellow, green, and blue intertwined with each other. The phantom of the gate became increasingly solid and dignified. Among the 5 colors, there was even a light blue that seemed to be embellished. Although it hadn't completely condensed into form, its existence itself indicated that this sickly-looking girl had almost achieved the magnificent scene of all 6 colors descending at the same time. "Are you willing to enter Golden Toad Palace to cultivate?" An old woman's voice suddenly sounded out from the Jade Gate Pass, echoing in everyone's ears. It was incomparably calm and natural. It released a boundless pressure, like a towering mountain whose peak couldn't be seen at a glance. "My Qingjiang Lake is willing to accept you as a direct disciple. You can enter the ancestral hall and receive the protection of the sect." Another mellow, middle-aged man's voice sounded out. Outside the Jade Gate Pass, everyone's eyes were filled with burning envy. Before even stepping into the Jade Gate Pass, he was already being fought over by 2 great sects of the central, desolate, divine region. This had not happened for many years. The black-clothed girl was silent for a moment. Then she respectfully said, "I'm sorry. Neither of your sides are my target." Like this, the man from Qingjiang Lake fell silent. The old woman from Golden Toad Palace coldly sneered. "Little girl, in the end, you aren't one of the 6 colors. It's best if you keep your feet on the ground and don't bite off more than you can chew." Golden Toad Palace can also give you the status of a direct disciple, but that is our bottom line. You might as well consider it. The black-clothed girl only shook her head. Humph! The old woman from Golden Toad Palace faded away. The black-clothed girl vanished from everyone's line of sight. She had actually directly rejected the recruitment of 2 sects of the central, desolate, divine region. Many people's eyes widened, disbelief on their faces. The 5 colors descended, suppressing this day. Afterwards, everyone was like stars in the night sky, each one of them dim. Yang Fanshan stepped into the tide of spiritual strength and erupted with 4-colored light. After him, the 2 Yang family cultivators, the skinny old man with a goatee and the dark-skinned woman. Each only had 3-colored light. As expected, the standard of judgment wasn't cultivation. As the number of people in front of him decreased, Qin frowned. He glanced at Little Meaty and saw that she had a calm expression. She lightly said, "Don't worry, I have already made my preparations." Then there was nothing to worry about.